All right, people, we are back for the Battle Hub Draft League Season 4 Power Ranking. So, we're going to be going through all 16 teams and ranking them on this tier list from scary to get in the bin. So, with that, I'm not alone. We are joined by Capt B-Nard and Brandon P. Fellow commissioners. Introduce yourselves, guys.
Guys, it's me, Capt B-Nard. Double inside joke there. Yeah, we are back for power rankings again. So we're going to go ahead and rank every team from S to D and then take a lot of shit for it afterward. All of you watching this. So it's going to be a good time. I'm here for it. There's a number of things that we're going to be thinking about when we rank these teams, but we'll explain that when we do the actual rankings, when we're discussing the teams. Additionally, we decided we are not going to be weighing in on our own teams since we're all basically doing draft analysis on our own YouTube channel. So if you want to see our thoughts about our own teams, you can check that out on our specific YouTube channels. However, if we do have a tie between the two coaches that are weighing in, then we'll ask the third person to weigh in to break the tie, essentially, so we can rank the team. But other than that, yeah, it's going to be a good time, like always. BHDL tradition to do these power rankings, and I'm here for it. Let's do it.
And what's up, everybody? It's your boy Brandon P, and I'm here to give you your daily disclaimer that let me clear my throat before I say this. Spoiler alert, everybody. Me, B-Nard, and Emerald, guess what? We're humans, and we're going to give our opinions. So please, just be nice to us. Please. I'm begging. All right?
Don't crucify us. Don't crucify us for our opinions. We are the opinions of three men, although we will try to be as objective and unbiased as possible. Another disclaimer is that we are not, Ray, not taking player skill into account when we rank these teams. So please do not be offended at how we rank your team, because we are just looking at opposite. Is that enough disclaimers? Are we ready to go? Emerald, what do you say?
Yes, one last disclaimer. I've got a timer here. We're going to do 7 minutes per team because last season it went for like 3 hours. And just a little inside behind the screens, we tried to record this a while ago, and we were taking way too long on each team, and I realized that we stopped recording. So I'm not going to go through the PowerPoint. I'm just going to click on each slide, and then we're going to go through the teams. So starting off with number 1, we've got the Legends of Lapras, led by Silver. So I'll start off here. So we got some Iron Val action with Aurora Veil. We've got the Terra Captains in Umbreon and Lapras, pretty good options to take out some fighting type weaknesses. We've got the Hazards being set by Glamora, although there is no ghost type spin blocker, unfortunately. Not a whole lot of priority either, outside of like Shadow Sneak from Iron Val and Gale Wings, Talonflame, and Ambipom and all that. Which is being undercut by the Psychic Terrain by Indeedee. So there's just a little bit of synergy that's being off-put here. Other than that, though, the Pokemon are very strong. Iron Val, Gudra, Sui, Lando. It's just they don't fit that well together, in my opinion. So with that, what's your opinion, B-Nard?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of the things you say. One thing I would add is that I think this team has really, really good speed control. So you have stuff like the Iron Valiant, the Talonflame, the Ambipom, even the Alolan Ninetales, to an extent, have some really high speed tiers. And yeah, so I think that's a big plus for this team. I like how this team is balanced offensively and defensively. There's a lot of strong Pokemon, like obviously the Iron Valiant, the premier threat that it is. Offensively, as well as the Landorus. Of course, shout out to your boy Joey Fontaine. And then, of course, we have the Talonflame there as well. But also there's good utility on the team with the Glamora, with the Umbreon, that kind of thing. The Gudra is great bulky offense, Hisuian Gudra that is, and then of course we can't forget about the Aurora Veil, Alolan Ninetales. But as well, I agree with you, the Terra Captains are well placed, and for the most part, I think the Terra types, since we're limited to 3 per Pokemon this season, I think those are very well placed as well, for the most part. On the negative side, I want to say I see a pretty glaring fighting and steel weakness on this team. That's an issue for me as when building teams. But additionally, there's not a lot of great priority or hazard removal options on this team, like you said. And then another big point is there seems to be a little bit of a lack of synergy with the Indeedee female there, like you said, undercutting the Talonflame and the potential priority from the Iron Valiant and the Ambipom. But overall, a pretty solid team, I think. What are your thoughts on that, Brandon?
I also think it's a pretty solid team. A lot of solid offensive and defensive options. Just like y'all pointed out, when I first looked at the team, I did just have a thought of like what is in like. To me, the Indeedee just looked kind of out of place because of how I've seen people typically use Ambipom, Valiant, Talonflame. Just because I've seen how people use those mons, I did feel like the Indeedee just looked kind of out of place. And I also had the critique of the fact that there's only a negative thing I saw also was the only hazard remove I really see is the Glamour with Mortal Spin, because I don't think Talonflame gets deep.
Oh, Talonflame does have defog though.
It does. All right.
But even so, those are kind of limited options as well.
It is. At least Talonflame has the fortune of having priority defog. So you know, I mean, that's kind of something.
Unless Psychic Terrain's up, but
that's
you could actually block your own priority defog with Psychic Terrain, right? That's
no, I don't think it works like that because Talonflame's off the ground.
Oh, but what if its targeting is on the ground though? We might have to do some research and get back to you on this one.
Yeah, maybe you just run Flame Body
down the rabbit hole now.
And the only other negative I really saw about the team though was the Aurora Veil is cool, but it's just like which mon. To me, when I see Aurora Veil, I try to look for like the mon that wants to get behind it and set up and sweep. But I can't really pinpoint that mon necessarily because like Iron Valiant, yes, it's strong, but it's also not the bulkiest mon either. And if you have God forbid, if you have like Bullet Punch or some other, or like even other priorities, like you can kind of, even through Aurora Veil, you can still kind of just handle that thing. Lapras appreciates it, but the moment it terrorizes, it doesn't have that defense boost anymore. And then, I don't really see what's... Like, I see how the Aurora Veil can slow down someone making progress through the team. I just don't see, like, like a setup mon that you would typically associate with the tech. But overall, I do think this is a solid team, though. And I'd also think the Terras are, like, well placed as well. Outside of the Terra.
I guess it would have been. Yeah, it would have been nice to see Ambipom as a Terra captain, additionally, but I can't complain about the Umbreon Lapras as Terra captains at all because they both greatly benefit from Terra.
And at the end of the day, he has to represent his mascot.
Absolutely. So with that,
what are we thinking about rankings?
What are we thinking? I think because of what we said about the problem with the synergy, I'm kind of leaning towards B, even though obviously they've got great mons like Iron Valiant and Gudra Hisui and Landorus. It's just like the puzzle pieces are all good pieces. It's just they're coming from different places and they don't really fit that well together. So I'm kind of leaning towards B.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think B is a very fair ranking for this team because it is a strong team. It does have a lot of powerhouses on it, but again, there are those problems. Like I said, a big one for me is going to be being upside down on that fighting weakness. That's a big one for me because Steel, is a little more manageable as a weakness, but being upside down on fighting is a problem. I think this team could have really benefited from a strong Ghost type. But yeah, I think B is a very fair for all the issues we had with it. B is a very fair ranking. What do you think, Brandon?
I think B is also fair, especially, and I also agree with the a strong Ghost type. So it's kind of unfortunate his only Ghost type, quote unquote, is the Terra Lapras, which he might not always want to do that. But I do think B is fair.
All right, so we'll go with coming through. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to number 2. I gotta love it. Our reigning champion, Anastasia. B-Nard, you want to start us off here? What we're looking at?
Absolutely. All right, so we'll take a look here. So obviously you can see Anastasia's team a little bit familiar from last season. A few returning faces there, but from top to bottom you have the Dragapult, the Primarina, the Corviknight, the Ogerpon Hearthflame, the Ukadoogie, the Incineroar, the Galarian Articuno, the Rigorath, the Sandslash, and the Toedscruel. So I noticed not one but two very strong defensive cores on this team. So right out of the gate, you have your Dragon Fairy Steel defensive core with the Dragapult, Primarina, and the Corviknight. But there's actually a very strong Fire, Water, Grass core on this team too, or actually kind of a couple different variations of that. So there's one with the Primarina, the Incineroar, and the Toedscruel. There's one with the Primarina and the Ogerpon Hearthflame. I guess just the two of them, or you could add in Toedscruel there if you want as well. So yeah, there's a lot of strong defensive capabilities on this team. There's a lot of utility as well with the Corviknight, with the Incineroar. The Ukadoogie pivots hard, which is nice. Obviously, the Toedscruel and the Sandslash is a lot of utility. Terra Captains are very well placed, in my opinion, specifically the Galarian Articuno. I know when we were building the tiers and deciding which Pokemon could Terra and which ones couldn't for this season, the commissioners team, we all pretty much agreed that Galarian Articuno should be able to Terra, but that it was probably going to be one of the strongest Terra captains, and I think certainly it will be, especially with those types that she has for it. So yeah, a lot of positives. The Toedscruel benefits from Terra as well because it likes to get out of that suboptimal grass ground typing. But the flip side here is, speaking of that, I think this team really has a very, very big and glaring ice and flying weakness, and to a little bit of a lesser extent, a dark weakness. So that's a big deal for me, obviously, being upside down on especially types that are so potent offensively, like ice and flying. Is a big negative for me, but also there's like pretty much no priority on this team aside from I think like Fake Out Incineroar, or maybe like Quick Attack, Sucker Punch Dragapult, or like Quick Attack on Ogerpon Hearthflame, or so very, very limited and suboptimal priority options, combined with very limited hazard setters. So you have, I guess, Ogerpon, you could set spikes, but it doesn't really want to do that. Sandslash, which is the lowest tier point value Pokemon on the team with Stealth Rocks, and then Toedscruel, which is a pretty suboptimal hazard setter in my opinion because of the Mycelium Might with the decreased priority on status moves.
Yeah, I know all about that.
So yes, you do. So definitely a good looking team, but definitely some issues with it as well. What do you think, Brandon?
I do think this is a pretty good looking team. Anyone who's known me as long as I've been in the BHDL knows I really love my offense, and I do think this team is very offensively threatening with the Dragapult, the Primarina, mold breaking Ogerpon who doesn't care about your abilities. I do wish the team had better ways to get hazards up, because I'm just trying to imagine, like, Articuno would prefer for something to front of it, but with the options that are here, it's questionable whether or not anyone's going to ever need to. But at the same time, you never know what could happen. But I do think the team has good hazard removal, though, because Toedscruel is a pretty good hazard remover. That's I have a positive opinion of Toedscruel, unlike some people. And then Corviknight, I feel like it's a pretty good hazard remover. I also think this team, under certain conditions, could look very, very scary. In particular, like Trick Room, maybe, and other stuff. But overall, I think this is a great team. What do you think, Emerald?
Yeah, I think that she's continued on adding to her previous season 3 team. Obviously, this time she has the team captain, the Primarina, but they've also got the existing cores and the Corviknight and the Incineroar. Lots of being able to pivot in and out. U-turn Dragapult, flip turn Primarina, U-turn Corv, U-turn Ogerpon, parting shot, U-turn Incineroar. So that's all very good. I wish, like B-Nard said, there was a little bit of better hazards. I'm not exactly sure what this Farigiraf is doing on this team. I know obviously it's very good in doubles with Ally Swish and Shenanigans and Armor Tail. Um, Obviously, you can do like an agility stored power set with like a weakness policy, but it would kind of prefer to be able to Terra to do that. Obviously, it can still do it, but I just think
Another
that
point about the Farigiraf is that when are you really realistically going to bring the Farigiraf over the Galarian Articuno as a psychic type, especially when that's your Terra Captain, you know?
yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a nice ghost type switching. I won't deny that, but I mean, Incineroar already kind of does that. You could easily just run Assault Vest Incineroar and eat up Shadow Balls all day long. Um, So, with that being said, though, I do like a lot of the pieces on the team. Like, obviously, just look at the top five. I'll just look at these breakers and then, like, just bulky Pokemon. But with that being said, I think just these last three just kind of, it's like everything was going great, and then the last, they were just, I just wanted a little something better. But with that being said, where are we thinking about ranking the team?
I would honestly say that this is an A tier team in my opinion. One thing that's really holding it back, in my opinion, is like I said, just those really glaring, unchecked ice and flying weaknesses, and also dark too. Those are, like I said, those are common offensive typings that you really don't want to be upside down on. So that's the biggest thing for me. So I would say A though. Like I said, there's a lot of power on this team, a lot of potential on this team. A lot of utility on this team, but at the end of the day, I think A is fair. What do you think, Brandon?
I think it's fair to put this team in A, since we are not. Remember, guys, we're not taking player skill into account, so I do feel like it's fair to put this team in A.
I
Disclaimers
agree.
galore.
Absolutely. I think it could be S tier. Has the definitely the potential. Any team with Dragon Ball has the potential to be S tier in addition to all the other mons. If it could just have a little bit better support. Well, I mean, it has good support in Corviknight and Incineroar, but just like in the realm of hazards and stuff like that, and maybe something other than Farigiraf. But with that being said, though, let's move on now to number three, none other than our own commissioner, Captain B-Nard. So, why don't you start us off, Brandon?
All right, so Captain B-Nard drafted Sneasler, Gudra, Scizor. This looks pretty familiar. You know what? Let me just keep going. Rotom Wash. Still looking kind of familiar. Indeedee, Mudsdale. Okay. Not suspicious at all. Grimmsnarl. Okay. Season 2 throwback. Drifblim. All right. You're a newbie. All right. Arcanine. I mean, it's kind of like a mirror. He had regular Arcanine last season. This season he has this Arcanine. So, I mean, you kind of, same boat. Azelf, I mean, you had Mesprit this last season. You got Azelf this season. So, pretty similar looking team to season 3, but, it's still different in its own ways. I remember when I first looked at his team, though, I was like, he has Indeedee instead of Pinchurchin this season for Sneasler. Major bonus from last season. Honestly, overall, I think the team is, well, I'm just telling like it is, practically the same season. Oh my goodness. Practically the same team from last season, but upgraded. I'm very interested to see how he's going to pilot this team. He has a lot of returning faces, Sneasler, Gudra, Mudsdale, who, if I remember correctly, last season Sneasler was a menace, and to me it has better support this time than it did last time. And I grew up with a saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And just wondering, what do you think, Emerald?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's like a mirror dimension, a parallel universe from his season 3 team. Him having the Indeedee male, not only does it get expanding force, so it can make use of that, it's also going to prevent any type of priority moves from being used against this Sneasler, which was my primary way of dealing with it because, of course, I love priority in addition to my hazards. Um, so with that being out of the window, that means that the only way to really deal with Sneasler is to kind of either somehow be faster than it and revenge kill it, or somehow be able to live its hit and then take it out that way. Their Terra Captains in Gudra and Mudsdale, like I always say, bulky Terra Captains are very good because they can basically just take off any hit and then be able to return with a very strong move in return. The ground on the Goodra is going to help with those pesky steel types. The water is just a very good defensive typing on both Goodra and Mudsdale. Fighting on Mudsdale for that body press, steel for that heavy slam. The Drifblim, I actually did fight this season 3 version of this team with a Drifblim, although I did choke with it. But it is interesting that they've also decided to include Drifblim, another unburdened Pokemon, which is also another defogger. So their hazard removal is 2 forms of defog, but B-Nard doesn't usually get too much hung up on the hazards like I do. So I don't think they're going to care if they remove their own hazards. That being said, Drifblim is a very good Pokemon with moves like Strength Sap, and I'm pretty sure it also gets Knockoff. I'm pretty sure I used that. Lots of good moves. Arcanine Asui can fire off those Rockhead head smashes. The Azelf can set up rocks and explosion, or it can be like a Life Orb set with a bunch of different attacks. Just be sure, B-Nard. I know that it's tempting to run Expanding Force Azelf with this Indeedee male, but just know that it does not get the boost, so don't get any ideas there. Only detractions really that I see of this team are going to be that Scizor is kind of being handicapped by this psychic terrain. It can't really throw off those bullet punches as much as it wants to. It can defog and then bullet punch if it wants to, but it'll have to spend a turn doing that. I do like this Grimmsnarl again. Anytime you can have any type of prankster Pokemon, that's always good. You can prankster T-Wave, prankster Screens, do all that jazz. Prankster Parting Shot, as long as I'm a Dark type. Overall, very strong team. I mean, you've got the physical attackers in Sneasler and Scizor. You've also got the special attackers and like the Expanding Force the Expanding Force in DD and Azelf. Drifblim can also put in work. Let's see, you go like Flare Boost or something like that. Arcanine Asui is also another very strong wall breaker, but the Goodra and the Mudsdale, the Scizor and the Rotom all pair very well defensively. So, with that being said, though, I know, B-Nard, you said you weren't going to give any of your thoughts, but do you think there was anything that we missed or anything you wanted to say before we ranked it?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. The biggest thing for me is that I was hoping, and it was pretty obvious, but I was hoping you'd all just pick up on the Mirror Dimension version of the Season 3 team that I built here. But that's what happens when you get sniped, is you go back to basics, and you go back to what works. But that's all I really have to add as far as that goes. Well, I was actually had my eye on Iron Val, to be honest.
Oh, but, if you're not in the top 2, bro, I know you were in the top 3, but...
Yeah, that wasn't enough though. Being in the top 3
you got to be top 2.
So close yet so far.
Yeah,
what's great?
I got it because people wanted to experiment, and I still got it at round 5 or the 5th position. But yeah, that was another thing. So with that, we're gonna get into ranking the Philadelphia Pidgeys. So like I said, the lack of detractions for me, I mean, there's just a lot of good, solid offensive and defensive Pokemon. I guess the only other real detraction I just thought of was that the best special attackers are like Azelf and Indeedee, both being psychic types. You've got the Drifblim. I guess Arcanine could probably run mixed. But other than that, not a lot of special attack. But I don't think that's the biggest deal in the world. I think that Goodra's also a decent special attack. Can drop Draco, so I don't think that's as big of a deal. I think I'm just used to. I remember Scorpion saying in a previous power ranking, "There's no Chi-Yu on this team," but I think it's going to get by just fine, because we're basing it off of its performance last season. If it's an improved version of a team that made it to the semifinals, then you can be sure that it's going to do pretty solid. So. I'm thinking S. What are you thinking, Brandon?
I think this is an S tier team as well.
Yeah. So it's pretty cut and dry to me, plain and simple. So we're gonna continue to move on now to my team. I'll just sit back and let you guys talk.
Right. Since I was resting my vocal cords there, I'll go ahead and work them out on this one. So, of course, we have Emerald's Demewlition Force back here, and he has drafted this season the Greninja, Annihilate, Metagross, Rillaboom, Hitmonlee, a personal favorite of mine, former Philadelphia Pidgey from a lot of seasons, draft leagues past. Then we have the Moltres, Galgi, Sandy Shocks, Lycanroc, Midday, and the Clefairy. So, big positives I have about this team. For starters, I want to say this team has a really good balance of offensive and defensive Pokemon. So it actually kind of screams a combination of like hyper offense and bulky offense, which I really appreciate because I'm more of a bulky offense player myself. So I really appreciate that. So, but you've got like straight offense like the Greninja, the Lycanroc, which by the way, as a Terra Captain, very well placed, and then the other Terra Captain, Hitmonlee, also very well placed. Then you've got like bulky offense, which is pretty much everything else on the team. So, aside from the Clefairy, so the other 6 members of the team there. But additionally, there's a lot of handy utility options with stuff like the Rillaboom, the Moltres, even the Greninja, honestly, can have more of a utility role if you want it to. And the pivots, the Sandy Shocks, the Rillaboom. One thing that I want to note about this team is that there is a lot of very strong priority on this team. So you've got the Bullet Punch Metagross, you've got the Grassy Glide Rillaboom, you've got Fake Out / Bullet Punch from Hitmonlee, you've got that Accelerock from Lycanroc Midday. So there's just so much. I mean, you've got the Water Shuriken from Greninja. I forgot about, but you've got so much strong priority on this team. It's amazing. And like I said, Terra Captain's very well placed, specifically the Lycanroc Midday. I think that thing is going to put in a lot of work for him. Negatives to this team, I would say, probably the biggest one I would say is that this team has a pretty big unchecked ground weakness, fairy weakness, and also to a lesser extent a ghost weakness. So again, for me, type interactions are the most important thing. So he's upside down on a lot of really commonly offensively used typings. Like I said, fairy and ground specifically, but even ghost to a lesser extent. Also, I would say there is only one form of hazard removal on this team, that being the Hitmonlee, which typically, if you're going to run an Unburdened set, which is the most optimal version of Hitmonlee as an Unburdened sweeper, not going to be running Rapid Spin or using a move slot for that. So you can't really afford to do that on that set. So that's definitely a negative for me as well. Another little negative, although I know I'm about to get disagreed with hard on this, is the Clefairy to me. I know Clefairy, look, I know it's 3 points for a reason. I know it can put in work sometimes in certain situations based on what you want to do with it. But at the end of the day, it's a Clefairy. That is a little bit of a negative for me. And I understand Emerald got sniped pretty hard, but specifically in that last round for a budget fairy. But yeah, overall, other than those things, I'd say a very, very solid team. What do you think, Brandon?
I just remember when I first looked at his team that I saw the ground weakness as well, but I also saw that he has ways to circumvent it, because like one of the mons is weak to ground, Lycanroc can just tear out of it. If your opponent's only real ground coverage is Earthquake, Rillaboom can help lower the damage for that. And I also just remember thinking that this team just looked so offensively threatening with like the Sandy Shocks, which is basically a walking nuke, just ready to just go. Annihilate and Greninja are always looming threats. Hitmonlee, Unburdened's a threat. I do dislike that the only form of hazard removal is Hitmonlee, because I would prefer to see it, doing other things than trying to remove hazards, because that means it more or less has to come every week and it has to have Rapid Spin. So it's just something his opponents will be able to account for. Now, unlike Mr. Captain B-Nard right here, I like the Clefairy, but that's just from what I've seen Clefairy do and just me thinking pretty highly of the mon, if I'm being honest. But overall, I do think this is a pretty solid looking team. And I'm not sure if we're ready to rank it yet, but personally, I think this is an A-tier team.
All right.
I would 100% agree with that. I think this was probably one of the easiest teams to rank for me on this list because I think there's no way I would ever put this team any lower than A. I think it's a very solid A through and through. The biggest thing that's throwing me off, like probably the two things that are throwing me off, Clefairy aside, is all those unchecked weaknesses. Like I said, are really throwing me. And then the only one hazard removal, but it's really the weaknesses to me that I couldn't put it any higher than A. But yeah, A is definitely where this team belongs in my opinion. And we know Emerald, great player, solid player. I think he's definitely going to make it happen with this team. But I think A is where it belongs.
All right, I appreciate it, guys. Yeah, I agree with all those things too. I might be looking to make some transactions later in the season, but we'll see. But I think it's going to be a very fun team to use, so I'm looking forward to it. So with that, we're going to move on now to the current owner of the Battle Hub Draft League, none other than Scorpion. So I'll start it off here. So we've got the Palafin. We're going to try to break the curse of Palafin this season, guys. We've got the Zapdos, the Tinglu, very strong defensive Pokemon. Cyclizar is pretty sure it's the only form of hazard removal, but I'll get into that in a bit. The Pokemon Cornerstone, excellent 100% accurate rock coverage. The Terra Delphox, the Mimikyu, the Grounded Poison being the Revavroom, the Terra Primate, and the Klefki. So, with this team, in my experience, I've seen that Palafin, which has only at this point, the thing that Scorpion has to beat is getting 3 wins with Palafin in a season. So, I've seen it do much better with Rain. And Just Weavile right now in the PPL is using it with Politoed. Before, I've seen people use it with Pelipper in the UNPL and make it all the way to finals. So I think that could help. Obviously, they could have Rain Dance Zapdos, but it's just something to think about. The Cyclizar, now I know he said that my team, and I agree with this, that the only form of hazard removal being Hitmonlee is the Attraction because it prefers to be able to like SD, Unburden, Sweep. Cyclizar, I don't think it's as big of an issue because it can afford to run heavy duty boots, rapid spin, U-turn out. That's its role. That's what it was designed to do. In addition to Shed Tail, which is banned, but we don't got to worry about that. So I think he'll be okay in that sense. I really like the Ogerpon. I know that it can't hold an item, but it does get the 1.2 times boost to all of its moves. It does have a 100% accurate Rock type move, which can SD Trailblaze. Can also set spikes. The Tinglu has all the hazards. The Prankster Klefki is very good for setting screens for something like a Shift Gear Revavroom. The Mimikyu is a solid spin blocker. I think I pretty much hit all my points. B-Nard, if you want to take over.
Yeah, so big positives about this team I have is I think there's a great balance of offensive and defensive Pokemon. Again, there's a lot of bulky offensive Pokemon, like the Palafin, obviously, probably the poster child for that. But also Zapdos, Tinglu, same thing. Great utility on this team with stuff like the Tinglu again, the Klefki with that Prankster. Let's not forget about that. Prankster screens, Prankster hazards. Obviously, great Pokemon. The utility with Cyclizar cannot be denied. Obviously, it's like the poster child for utility Pokemon in Gen 9. I do think it's a little bit of a negative that it's his only form of hazard removal, just due to the fact that even though it does hazard removal better than just about any Pokemon, it is a negative because that's going to make it more predictable, right? So like he's gonna pretty much force to be that set and bring Cyclizar pretty much every week that he's worried about hazards. So that's going to make it a little easy to account for, but it does still do what it does very well. I'll say the Terra Captains are very well placed with the Delphox, even though I don't think Delphox is that great of a Pokemon personally, but as a Terra Captain, I think it could put in a lot of work, especially with those Terra types that it has. Fire, Grass, Fairy seem very appropriate. Same thing with the Primeape. Eviolite Primeape that could be Terra Ghost, Steel, or Fairy could put in a lot of work, I think. And well placed, as I said. On the flip side, I see a pretty big ground weakness on this team. So he's got, I believe, 3 ground weaknesses on this team and only 1 resistance. Although, yes, he could Terra out of that, at least with one of those Pokemon. But nonetheless, that is still a negative for me. As I said, again, I really value those type interactions, and ground is not a type you want to be upside down on as far as weaknesses to resistances. Very common offensive type. But also, one of the more probably the biggest negative I have about this team is I feel like a lot of his Pokemon are handicapped in one way or another. And what I mean by that is, and let me tell a brief story here, because I see a Palafin and I see an Ogerpon on this team, and it is very reminiscent of the BHDL2 Philadelphia Pidgeys, where I had a Palafin and an Ogerpon Hearthflame on that team, and we all know how badly I did that season. It was the dark hour for the Pidgeys that season, but that's to say that I really learned a lot about how those Pokemon are not nearly as optimal as you may think. So the Ogerpon not being able to hold an item every week is going to be a problem. I think that's a negative that I don't think on paper you really realize what a negative that is until you actually get into the game. Similarly, the Reveroom is kind of an aside. I think Reveroom is kind of a weird Pokemon because it's got a weird typing, so that gives it strange weaknesses and resistances, but also it has a weird speed tier. So Reveroom is a strange one to account for, I think, in team building with team composition. But also the big one for me is the Palafin. So I don't think a lot of people realize what a disadvantage it is that you have to get Palafin in and then switch it out to get it into hero mode, because especially in draft, when you see it coming, it makes your turn one of every game so predictable. It's like, okay, turn one of every game you have to start with Palafin, and if you sense that it's in danger from something, you can't even pivot out with it if that's the set you're using. You have to just hard switch it, and you give your opponent that free turn one every game. And I can tell you guys from experience that is a huge negative to this Pokemon, because it makes you very predictable, and if you choose to not be predictable and not lead with the Palafin, then you're stuck with a very, very bad Pokemon in base form Palafin. And it's like, you can't really switch base form Palafin in and take a hit very well either, so because its stats are abysmal. So I think that's a big negative that until you use Palafin, you don't fully appreciate. I do think that this team is very well constructed to support Palafin better than any of the other teams we've seen in the BHDL, my own included. I have no doubt in Scorpion's ability. He's a great player. But obviously, we're not taking player skill into account here. We're just looking at the teams on paper. But yeah, I think that's the big negative for me, is just those threats being handicapped in one way or another. But what do you think, Brandon?
I do think that overall Scorpion has a pretty great team. I actually like his Terra captains too. I like the Delphox. I think the Terras are well placed, and I like the Primate. I feel like with a Violite, Primate, and Terra, that thing's gonna do something. Scorpion is on a campaign to make Palafin great again, and I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt today that he just might do it. So I do feel like he built the team, a pretty good team to support Palafin. There are some weaknesses, like with ground, but at the same time, he has his ways to get around those. Especially considering, if I'm not mistaken, Reveroom, its ability makes it take less damage from super effective moves than it normally would. I could be wrong about how filter works, but I think that's how filter.
Yeah, if it has filter.
3/4.
Yeah, so granted,
Still not going to let it live in EQ though.
Yeah, still.
No, not at all.
But other than that, I do think he has a pretty great team overall, and I got some ideas on how he might try to use some of these mons. Don't want to put him out there like that, but I do think he drafted a pretty good team for who he is.
I know that he was trying to get a lot of pivots to bring in the Palafin. And then also, I got to shout out his Delphox. I know you just played through X and Y, and that was his starter. For me, Delphox is also a very special Pokemon because X and Y was my first game, and Delphox was my first Pokemon. And I love Psychic types, and this was like the first Fire Psychic starter, so that's pretty cool. That being said, though, where are we thinking about ranking the team, guys?
Well, for me, in my opinion, I think this is a solid A team. We didn't even talk about the Mimikyu, the big X factor that the Mimikyu is, which is a big positive to his team. But yeah, to me, I think this is a solid A team. He's got a really nice looking team put together here. But for me, the thing that holds it back In addition to the ground weakness and a couple other little things, the big thing that holds this team back from S, in my opinion, is just the fact that those big threats like the Palafin, like the Ogerpon, are handicapped in one fashion or another. But what do you think, Brandon?
I would also put this team in A tier. Primarily, but my primary reason is because there's only one form of hazard removal, which is Cyclozar, albeit it's designed to do that. But I've always just would prefer to see more than one hazard remover, because you only have one. That means you have to break it every week. Someone can prep for it. In Cyclozar's case, if you just bring your Ghost type, all right, you spin block it. And I feel like that kind of sucks for Ogerpon in particular, because if its sturdy is broken because of hazards, now if that's something he was relying on, can't really use it anymore.
Doesn't really have an ability.
But other than that, I think it's a pretty solid team, and I would put it in A.
I think I'm starting to realize why B-Nard likes his Levitators so much, because ground is such a hard type to build around in draft, because 5 types are weak to it. So the best way to deal with that is we're going with Levitate, so you don't have to worry about it.
And it feels like every
absolutely
ground coverage.
You figured me out, man.
I think I finally cracked the code. All right.
Yes, indeed.
So we're gonna move on to our next coach, season 1 and 2 champion Raymond. So B-Nard, why don't you start us off? Yes.
You got it. I will talk about Scholar and Violer Raymond and the power team he has drafted this season. So, from top to bottom, we have the Latios, no Baxcalibur this time. We got the base form Ogerpon, which is the only one that can actually hold an item. That is also important to note. We got the brand spanking new for the BHDL this season anyway, Terrapagos, Pokemon that will not die. Then, of course, we have the Tinkaton. We, of course, have the Mamoswine. Finally.
It's time. Wow, it took him 4 seasons.
Yes, 4 seasons. But finally, 4 seasons in, Ray decided he was going to draft the mascot, which I love it. Then, of course, we got the Tornadus Therian, I think that is. Yep. Oh, that's the Tornadus, sorry. Or did I get it right the first time?
No, you got it. That's Therian.
Yes, Tornadus Therian. We have the Overquill, the Lantern, the Blaziken. Important to note that the Speed Boost is banned on the Blaziken, so there's going to be no Speed Boost Blaziken, which is why it's allowed to be a Terra Captain, as you did. And we have the Rotom Fan. So, big positives about this team I have. Number 1, of course, is going to be type balance. So you all know me already. I'll say it a million more before the end of the video. Type balance is very, very important to me, and this team has, outside of a little bit of an ice weakness, has no real glaring weaknesses, so I can appreciate that. I think it's offensive and defensive balanced as well, so you have Pokemon that you could consider bulky offense on this team, like the Latios, but you also have the Blaziken for straight up offense. You've got great utility on this team with the Terrapagos, with the Tinkaton, with the Mamoswine, the Tornadus obviously as well, the Overquill, so a lot of utility there. Good pivoting as well. On the flip side, one of the negatives I have about this team, and this is like a 50-50 negative for me, is I feel like Terra Captain Lantern is a bad choice. I feel like if he had made the Rotom Fan a Terra Captain, that would have been a better call. But that's just my opinion. I think the Blaziken is really good as a Terra Captain, is really solid, so I don't question that. But I think that the Rotom Fan would have benefited more from being a Terra Captain, because anytime you can make a Levitator a Terra Captain, going back to the code that you've cracked, Emeralds, you get that Levitator with make it like a pure electric type or a fire type, or whatever the case, you're going to be in for a good time. So I think he could have made better use of the Terra Captain status there if it was Rotom Fan rather than Lantern. I don't think Lantern benefits as much from Terra, but that's just me. But yeah, other than that, I think it's a really good-looking team. We'd expect no less from Scholar and Violer Raymond here. former 2-time champion, of course. But Brandon, what are you thinking about this team here?
I remember when I first was looking over this team, I was just thinking to myself, this team is very strong offensively with options like the Ogerpon, the Latios, the Blaziken. Even though it doesn't have speed boost, it's still a very, very powerful Pokemon. The Mamoswine. I actually like that Lantern Kintera because I've, I don't want to like embarrass myself, but I've been on the receiving end of what a Lantern can do, and I'm gonna just leave it at that. I'm gonna just take my end as they come. But the only Mon on this team overall that I don't like is the Rotom. But that's only because I have this little tidbit, I think that's the word I'm looking for, where I just don't like Levitate on Mons that already have the flying type. So part of me does also agree that kind of wish it could Terra, but I actually like it better on Lantern just because, one, Gen 2 nostalgia, and two, it's a Lantern. You gotta love Lantern. But I think it's a pretty great team. Very interested to see how he pilots this team, and I like how his team has immediate power because I already talked about the strong offensive threats, and he actually has the Ogerpon, which can hold an item, as you pointed out, and that just makes this thing, you don't know what to expect. And he has different ways to annoy you with the Terrapagos, the Overquill, the Tinkaton, because it does get pretty good utility moves like Encore, T-Wave. And overall, I just think he has a good team, good Terra captains. And what do y'all think about it ranking-wise?
Oh wait, I gotta give my thoughts too.
Oh,
so
I thought you did.
Yes.
So I can see both sides because I think too that having Lantern is I can see what he's trying to do. He's trying to play into is it a Water Absorb or is it Volt Absorb? But I feel like maybe they should have had a Terra type. I don't know, like maybe Terra. I don't know, something weak to water. That way they could make better use of the Water Absorb. But it's also good to note that I don't see any spin blockers apart from a potential Terra Ghost Lantern. There is, I will give B-Nard the credit on the Rotom though, because the cool thing, if you Terra Rotom, you can Terra Electric so that you don't have you have no weaknesses. But you can also even like Terra Flying, that way you can have stab adaptability, 100% flying type moves in Terra Blast, that way you don't have to worry about missing Air Slash. But for me, I think the biggest thing about this, you look at like their defensive Pokemon. What are they? Overquill, Lantern, Tinkaton. What's the biggest thing about? They're all weak to ground. You just can't escape it. They're all just weak to ground. You can Terrafly the Lantern obviously and be Volt Absorb, and that's pretty good. But that's the thing, you have to Terra it. So they obviously have the Tornadus Therian, which can run. You can make the thing bulky with like an Assault Vest. Then if you do that, you can't run boots. So you're risking taking rocks. So Latios, obviously Levitator. But if you get the turn, like let's say you're in versus like a Great Tusk or something, then now they go for knockoff. So now you don't have any more ground switch-ins. So
Let's
that's
not
just
forget
one
about the
thing.
Blaziken. That's
right. I've got. Oh yeah, the Blaziken, one of the biggest. Yeah, obviously another ground weakness. But I was also gonna say this thing, Terra fighting, the adaptability close combats are gonna go absolutely insane. This is one of the best parts of their team, the Terra Blaziken. That's another thing. If they have Terra Blaziken, when are they gonna use Terra Lantern? That was me with my Reverie last season. If I have a Terra Lucario, why am I going to use a Terra River? But all that being, I don't want to dog on Raymond too much because I love the Latios, I love the Terrapagos, one of the best rapid spinners in the game. Of course, the Mamoswine is such a good, potent, offensive Pokemon. It's so good. And it has Ice Shard for priority. We know how much they love Ice Shard. There's a lot of good Pokemon on the team. Overall, though, like I said, I think really the only detraction for me is just the ground weakness. You just can't escape it. In draft, obviously they've got 3 Pokemon that are immune to it, which is great, but they just aren't exact. I guess Rotom Fan has the defenses of a Rotom wash. It just doesn't have the typing that you'd want with it.
Yes.
So it's not the best ground switch-ins in the world, but they are ground switch-ins nonetheless. So I guess I can't give it to them too hard for that. Yeah. They also have Intimidate on Overquill, so it can take them a little bit better at least. But okay, with that being said, though, for the Mamoswine Doubters, I'm kind of feeling like A rank. What are you guys thinking? You guys think? Or you think it should go to S?
I think A seems. I think A is fair. I would agree with you. I think A is fair because you do have that little bit of a. Let's not forget we do have those ice weaknesses that are kind of unchecked, little bit unchecked.
Right.
But yeah, this is a really solid team overall. I feel like it's close. It is really close, but at the end of the day, like everything I see from this team makes me lean more A than anything. So my vote would be for A. I mean, we have no doubt in Raymond as a player, obviously. But when
we say all this stuff, and HC's still gonna probably end up going all the way to the finals. So don't take our word don't take it to heart.
We're talking about a guy who the worst he's done in this league is make the semifinals. So but yeah, that speaks for itself. But yeah, I do think of all the teams when we look at other teams as well. I think that this team is really good. It's really solid, but I think it gets kind of eclipsed by a couple other teams that we've yet to talk about. So I think A is fair, but that's my. What do you think, Brandon?
I would also put this team in the A tier. Y'all have pretty much said all the reasons I would have said to put it in A. So yeah, ain't really much point in repeating what y'all guys said.
Oh, so I don't think his ice weakness is too bad. I mean, they've got the Lantern, the Tinkaton, and the Thick Fat Mamo, so I don't think it's too bad. But yeah, it's like 50-50. But yeah, so A tier. A tier is really racking up over here. All right, so
as I thought it would be.
Yeah. Next up, we've got the two Cool Typhlosions, new coach Cobra. So Brandon, why don't you get into this team?
All right, so Cobra's team consists of, he has the Roaring Moon, the Golden Go, the Weezingowler. So already he has an amazing Fairy Dragon Steel core. He has the Dunsparce, or is this Dunsparce? Yeah, the Dunsparce. Yeah, I gotta get used to it. I'm not.
That always gets me too.
Which is actually his Terracat, which I think is pretty. It's cool. It's cool. Two Cool Typhlosions. The Terracat and Typhlosion. So another person representing their mascot. You gotta love it. You gotta respect it. You got the Gyarados, the Amoonguss, the Gligar. He has
Round A Gligar.
And then he has the,
there it is.
The Espeon and the Iron Hands. And you know what? Gotta appreciate him because finally Iron Hands got drafted. It has not been drafted at all.
Yes, sir. There we go. Good job, Cobra. We will say Stefan originally drafted it, and this was a transaction. He dropped Piedmont to get Iron Hands.
But looking at this,
disclosure
for sure. But looking at this team at first glance, I thought the team was like a my first thought was this looks like a very fun. This would look like a fun team to use. He has some pretty cool offensive threats in the Roaring Moon, the Golden Go, the Gyarados, even the Typhlosion at their, especially if it's Scarfed Eruption. If you don't have no good switch-ins to that, hey, good luck. Iron Hands, depending on how he wants to EV it, and the set, that thing may or may not want to die. Usually it just doesn't want to die. It just refuses. When I first looked at the team, I did think that I did raise an eyebrow at the Terra Captain, the Dunsparce. But at the same time, this is not a Pokemon I'm familiar with, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But it made me raise an eyebrow. I don't really know what to expect from that. Typhlosion, hey, it's his mascot. You got to respect it. I know that he's familiar with a lot of these mons, so I think he's going to do really well in this season with it. So I'm very interested in seeing what he'll do. Like I said, I think the team has some good cores with the Fairy Dragon Steel, even the Water Fire Grass. And what do you guys think about the team? Capt B-Nard.
Yeah, so I like this team actually. I'll say the big positives I have are I like number one. I like the type balance on this team. Although I will say he's a little bit upside down on the ghost weaknesses. He has a little bit of a ghost weakness on the team. But other than that, the team's pretty type balanced. As well, it's balanced offensively and defensively. He's got obviously stuff like the Roaring Moon. And the Hisuian Typhlosion, the Espeon that are so fast and hit so hard. Then you have like bulky offense like the Goldango. The Terra Captain, the Dunsparce could be, bulky offense, could really put some work in, I think. You got, like I was saying, the Terra, like you were saying, I should say, the Terra Captains are well placed, I think. I like the Terra Captain to Dunsparce, honestly. I'm interested to see what he does with it. As well, I think Hisuian Typhlosion also benefits greatly from Terra. Just imagine trying to switch something in on like a Specs Terra Fire Eruption. Like, that's not going to go well. But also, I would say on the flip side of that, probably the biggest negative I have of this team is this team has basically no priority on it and basically no hazard setting on it. So, like, what on this team gets priority? Like, what of these Pokemon get priority? I don't
know. Iron Hands.
That's it. What does Iron Hands get for priority?
Fake out.
Fake out. So his only priority is fake out Iron Hands. That's a huge negative to me. What of these Pokemon can set hazards?
So the Dunsparce has rocks.
Spikes?
The Weezing has T-Spikes. The Gligar is actually their best hazard setter. It gets all of them, I'm pretty sure, like Gliscor, right?
I don't mean to cut you off, but I don't think Galarian Weezing gets Toxic Spikes. Isn't that only regular Weezing that gets Toxic Spikes?
No, it gets Toxic Spikes. I know from experience.
I've definitely seen it.
Okay, my bad.
And
but
the Gligar is their hazard setter.
And one more thing.
So,
he does Magic Bounce on the Espeon, so it's like
yes.
He's going to use them against them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if he's going to rely on Magic Bounce Espeon, that's one thing. But yeah.
Yeah, you talk about like contrast that with the best spin blocker in the game, Golden Go. It's the kind of like, what am I here for?
Yeah, pretty much. So, so that's if your best hazard setter is Gligar, then that's not the best thing in the world for me. That's a little suboptimal, but yeah. So yeah, that's probably the biggest negatives I have is that there's, like I said, there's a little bit of a ghost weakness. And then the priority thing is really throwing me. Like, if your only priority is fake out, like that's a problem. But,
I agree.
But what do you think, Emerald?
Yep, so agree with all the above. If we take a look at their defensive Pokemon, they've got 2 poison types, interestingly enough. They do have, if we look at the Roaring Moon and the Golden Go, I was watching the PPL stream and someone also had a team with Roaring Moon and Golden Go as the first 2 picks, and it was just like, is this a standard OU? But then we could see that they've also got some mons like the Gyarados and the Typhlosion that can also hit very hard. But then you can kind of see where that kind of dip down into the points because they're having to resort to using Gligar now as their hazard setter. Of course, we do have the Dunsparce, which could lead Stealth Rock and Terra Ghost, so it can't be Rapid Spun on. But you kind of want to use that for the Terra Fire Eruption on the Typhlosion. I really am excited to see what the Iron Hands can do. Like we said, just a lack of priority and good hazard setters. So let me see, what are the other good defensive Pokemon besides Amoonguss and Galarian Weezing? I guess Golden Go's okay. The Dunsparce is pretty bulky.
Iron Hands.
Oh yeah, Iron Hands is very bulky. Slap an Assault Vest on that thing and it'll never die.
And a Gligar can be bulky.
Oh, if I like Gligar is bulky. Okay, so they're set. They're good. So overall, we got the checkpoints. We've got good offensive mons, good defensive mons. You just need a little bit more for hazard. Wait, where's their removal? Oh no, buddy.
Defog Galarian Weezing. That's about it.
Defog Galarian Weezing. Okay, so they've got that at least. That's a good hazard remover. Better than not having it.
They have it.
Yeah, it's not the best, but it's better than nothing, And you're gonna remove your own hazards. But with that being said, though, it is interesting too that they've got the 2 ghost types, and they could potentially have a third if the Ghost Terra type, the Dunsparce Terras. I think we've said enough about this team, though. So, what do we think about ranking it?
Personally, I would put this team in the B tier.
Yeah, same thing. The lack of priority is really throwing me.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I was a little bit torn between you guys. I would have thought to put it maybe a little bit higher, but yeah, priority is I think we can't understate how important priority is.
Priority is king
in Pokemon. It is very very useful. I mean, the two Psychic Terrain teams that we've seen had more priority than this team on it. So,
jeez,
what
a tragedy.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's a lot of so to me, I think B is fair just because there's a lot of little things, and then the big glaring thing is the lack of priority. But then there's a lot of other little things like being upside down on Ghost, which Ghost is a very good type neutrally to hit things with. And then having not the greatest hazard setting options either. So, and a couple little things like that. So yeah, I think that the little things adding up plus the big thing, I think makes B fair. So I'll go with
we can't deny, though. I mean, they've got 2 Dragon Dancers and a Spextire Fire Up. So this team is going to hit hard. It's just not going to do it with hazards.
There's a lot of power on this team. Yeah, there's a lot of power on this team, but it's got those issues.
All right. So with that B tier, we're going to move on now to the California Trailblazers. So is it my turn to start? I'll start.
I think so.
Okay, so we've got the Meowscarada, the team mascot, the captain. But we've also got a good Pokemon in Iron Moth, a good defensive mon in Scarm, very good rapid spinner in the Hitmontop, the Swampert, the Terra Alolan Raichu, the Florges, very good fairy type. We've got the Hydreigon, Frostlass, and the Grafaiai. So overall, let me see. So I'm pretty sure that Hitmontop is the only hazard remover, right? I don't think Hydreigon gets defog anymore, if I'm not mistaken.
It does not.
Okay, so I mean, that being it much like the Cyclizar, this mon it's designed. Look at it, it's spinning right now. It's designed to rapid spin, and it could be Terra Captain. No, that's Corviknight. It can set the hazards, it just can't remove them. Yep.
Fair enough.
I would kind of want to see a similar to the Ambipom. If you could get a Terra Ice on this Technician Triple Axle one, that thing could hit as hard as V-Create Victini. But other than that, the thing is, I see a lot of special attackers, very strong special attackers, I'll add, like the Iron Moth and Nasty Plot Hydreigon, Nasty Plot Alolan Raichu. You've got Florges, who can hit decently hard. Frostlass is kind of mixed. But then in terms of physical breakers, really the only one I see is the Meowscarada. I guess the Hitmontop can hit decently hard with its priority, but I think it's 95 base attack. All right, it's not the strongest Pokemon in the world. Swampert's a great defensive Pokemon. If it was Mega, it'd hit hard, but it's not. You've got an Unburdened Sweeper, actually, who's probably not going to be that because there's no terrain. Though this team, if you could get electric terrain on this team somehow, you've got the Iron Moth, the Surge Surfer, and a potential Unburdened Sweeper here, so that could be pretty cool. But this month probably just going to be Prankster, which, hey, Prankster's good. Prankster Encore, Prankster Parting Shot, all great stuff. I would just like to see a little bit more of a physical breaker presence on this team. With that, though, what do you think, B-Nard?
So, one of the biggest things that jumped out at me at this team is, if ever there was a team that would benefit from drafting Pincurchin, right? Like, this would be it. It feels like such a missed opportunity not having Pincurchin on the... You've got the Iron Moth, which is a great special attacker. You've got the Alolan Raichu, that double speed from the Surge Surfer. You've got a potential Unburdened Mon with the Grafaiai. Granted, they're all weak to ground. And then Pincurchin would be a 4th ground weakness. But having said that, Raichu could Terra out of that weakness. Maybe if there was a different Unburdened Mon other than Grafaiai, I don't know. But I feel like the skeleton of this team feels like a pink urchin would fit so well on here, and it's just not there. So I know that's not what he was going for, because he would have picked it up if it was, but that's kind of a missed opportunity in my opinion with this team. But honestly, I don't really have too much negative to say about this team, other than that and the kind of the lack of like physical breakers. I do agree with you there. But this team is very type balanced, I think, which is a big plus for me. There's a lot of utility on there with like the Skarmory, the Hitmontop, the Frostlass. We can't forget about the Frostlass. There's speed with the Meowscarada and the Hydreigon, and the Iron Moth, of course. Good Terra Captain placement, I think, with specifically the Alolan Raichu, I think. It would be nice if he could, there was something that would make use of that Surge Surfer, like going back to the Pincurchin thing. But Terra Captain Raichu is a good placement, I think. Hitmontop also benefits from Terra, I think, too, specifically if it can Terra Steel to get out of all of those weaknesses. So yeah, I like that stuff a lot, and yeah, I do think this is a really solid team overall. But what do you think, Brandon?
I do think that whenever he watches this video and hears that you said if there ever was a team that could benefit from Pincurchin, he is going to laugh till he can't laugh no more, because Pincurchin, oddly enough, is one of those mons that if you bring it up in a conversation with him, he has nothing but funny negative things to say about it. So I know when he hears that, he's gonna have a blast hearing that. But I do share a lot of you guys' viewpoints. Like, this team has a lot of special attackers, but the only real notable physical attacker I see is Meowscarada. Because I mean, yeah, Grafaiai, Swampert, and even the Hitmontop and the Skarmory can hit on the physical side, but at the same time, they're not really threatening anything. Because Skarmory, what is it, like base 70, Hitmontop base 95, Grafaiai, I know it's in the base 90s because I've used it before.
Swampert is like 100 or something. I
believe so.
Yeah, it might be 100.
But the thing about
unless you're,
yeah.
I was gonna say unless you're doing 110. Okay, that's not bad. But unless you're doing body press Skarm, that thing's not really putting a dent in anything.
Yeah.
And then it's like once one of those physical mons go down, if your opponent preps with like there's Spadef walls, if he doesn't have a good way to break them, like after the physical mons go down, he can just have a tough time. But I actually do agree, this team would benefit with Pincurchin. He's not gonna like hearing that, but we're here to be objective, right?
Well, listen, if we can give one counter to the Pincurchin argument, I will say, between me and B-Nard, I believe that Pincurchin has made it to the semifinals of every single season.
For the most part, yeah, actually it has. And this season it went undrafted, so Pokemaster Chris, it's still out there, it's still available. It's
still available. You can continue on the tradition.
Because to be honest, Grafaiai could go, you put a nice little sea urchin right there, and now he doesn't have one more ground weak. Y'all get the idea.
I would almost even look into like an unburdened mon that is not weak to ground, and then like try to replace Grafaiai and something else with like that and Pincurchin, and then he'd have a pretty solid electric terrain strategy on there. Speaking from someone who has used electric terrain strategies to great effect in the past. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. Continue.
But no, you pretty much took the words right out my mouth. So what do you guys think in regards to tearing this team?
I was leaning A. I don't know if you guys what were you guys thinking?
Yeah, I was really thinking A, to be honest with you, because I really don't have too much bad to say about this team at all. I think that I have little nitpicks here and there, and then the Pincurchin, not having that added layer of synergy. Like, I think if this team had that added layer of synergy, it would be an S team. And if it had like, excuse me, if Grafaiai was not there and it was like a physical, like a really fast physical unburden sweeper, and then there was a Pincurchin on the team too, I think this would easily be an S tier team. But I think those few things that we talked about is kind of holding it back from that, so I would say A.
Right. You thinking the same thing, Brandon?
I would also put it in the I would also put his team in A tier. The only main thing holding me back is just like 2 physical, like notable physical attackers, and then just a whole lot of special attackers. Not that I don't think he could make them work anyway, but I think A is fair.
All right,
Please,
there we go.
Give the
Please. Side note: if we don't usually give unsolicited advice to people, but here it is. We all say draft Pinkert.
If you get nothing out of this video, Pokemaster, it's draft Gurchin immediately.
Give the sea urchin a try.
All right.
Give the urchin a chance.
So we're going to move on to our next coach here. It's the Sleepy Laxingtons, coached by a lazy boy. So why don't you start us off, Cap?
Got it. All right. So looking at his team here, Lazy Boy and the Sleepy Laxingtons from top to bottom. We have the Darkrai, Aquavol, Pecharunt, which is making its BHDL debut, of course. Then we've got the Alolan Executor, the Jirachi, the Ursaluna Blood Moon. We also have the Oricorio, which, as per our league rules, you have access to all 4 Oricorio when you draft just one. Then we have the Enamorous Therian, I believe that is. And
That's correct.
Then, all right, I'm 2 for 2. And we have the Mousehold, and we have the Lycanroc Dusk. So, positive things I have to say about this team. Once again, type balance very important for me. So I think this is a pretty tight balanced team. Outside of a little bit of an unchecked ice weakness, he doesn't really have any other glaring issues with the team, but he does have a little bit of an unchecked ice weakness. There's a lot of good utility on this team with stuff like the Pecharunt, for example. Jirachi could be. Of course, you have the Lycanroc as well. Additionally, I would say he's got kind of on the flip side. This team is not the best at speed control, in my opinion. So there are, aside from the Darkrai, which is pretty fast, and then the Mousehold, which is kind of fast, there's really not a lot of like really speedy Pokemon on here. This team feels like it would massively benefit from Trick Room. So that's a big thing, I think. And I believe a couple of his Pokemon can set Trick Room, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be a consideration for me. I guess going back to the kind of sort of going back to the positive side. Well, actually, let's not do that. So I'm a little. Let me put it this way: I'm a little torn about the Terra Captain selections because I feel like they're like I'm simultaneously like positive and negative about them, like if that makes sense, because there's a Mousehold right there, and that thing would benefit from Terra so much that like I would love to see that thing as a Terra Captain, but it's not. So that's throwing me a little bit. Additionally, I feel like the hazard removers on this team are kind of suboptimal, aside from Mousehold gets Tidy Up, right, but it's not a Terra Captain, so he's not really incentivized to bring it. Then you have Defog on Oricorio, which is like that's kind of not optimal because you want typically Oricorio to be a Quiver Dancer, and you won't have room for Defog on that set. Specifically, since he made Oricorio his Terra Captain, I would assume he's not going to be bringing like a Defog Oricorio most weeks. And then, of course, you have Rapid Spin on Quaquaval, which is like we talked about this before, but you don't really have room for Rapid Spin on Quaquaval if you're going to use the optimal set. So it just feels like all of his hazard remover, even though he technically has 3 different types of hazard removing, it feels like they're all kind of subpar in one way or another, if that makes sense. But additionally, the last thing I would say about this team, and this is something that I can't quite put my finger on, but the team just kind of feels underwhelming. Like Lycanroc Dusk is like kind of whatever to me, but the team as a whole just feels a little underwhelming to me. Like it feels like it almost should be a Trick Room team, but it's kind of not. So like I don't know, it's a little strange. I had a hard time really pegging this team, but what do you guys think about it, Brandon?
I remember when I first looked at the team, I thought it was a very strong offensive team because the Darkrai is Darkrai, Quaquaval. All he needs is an Aqua Step and a Boot and an Unmoxie, and he just snowballs whatever is in front of him. Pretty interested to see how Petront does. I share a lot of the viewpoints you had, but I do see, and I also do think this team would. I feel like this is going to be like a Trick Room-ish team ? Because he has some mons like the Darkrai who wouldn't want to be on a Trick Room. Quaquaval probably, we know how Aqua Step works. I know he has mons that would benefit from it, like the Executor and the Ursa Luna.
Absolutely.
I have the same opinions in regards to the hazard removal because Maushold. I mean, considering when, from my viewpoint, like I'm guessing he drafted it like towards the end of the draft. Maybe he just didn't. Maybe that's just all that was left. Maybe that's how it was. But the other hazard removers, I know they would prefer to not have that. So that was like a little nitpick I had about the team as well. Not really the most optimal hazard removal. And but overall, I do think this is like a strong like team. If he can get Trick Room out, like there's some mons who could really, really benefit from it. And I also think that a lot of these mons are not they're not one trick ponies either. And just depending on how he crafts the team, I feel like he can still do something with this team.
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think, Emerald?
Yeah, I think to P-Nard's point about base weakness, I think maybe he felt a little self-conscious about that, and that's why he went to make the Executor and the Terra Captain over Maushold. But I think it would still be better if you just made Maushold the Terra Captain, because then that could turn this thing into that turns this thing into one of your win cons, If you could like a Terra normal population bomb and blow something up, or Terra whatever, that would be great. He's got a lot of bulky offensive Pokemon like the Ursaluna Blood Moon and the Eternatus. And of course, we've got the Jirachi, which is an excellent Pokemon that can always just, if you got to do it, when there's a Jirachi, there is a way. Scarf Ironhead,
Oh,
But,
no.
yeah, I agree, all the same points. I really want to see what they do with Darkrai, because I've been hearing some allegations about Darkrai in other leagues that it might be a little bit of a fraud. Like, it just doesn't hit quite hard enough. I mean, we saw when I battled Just Weavile. I mean, obviously, I think when Just Weavile used it in his first week, it did great. But after that, it just kind of, well, we didn't really get to see a lot of his other games. But I just know that it's not that strong, or it's not that strong defensively. I mean, it could absolutely take one hit, but it's only going to take one hit, and it might be taking that one hit to Nasty Plot, and then it's dead to a priority move. So
it might be one of those. It's almost like another Palafin in a sense that it seems like it's better than it is, if that makes sense. Got a little bit of an illusion.
I think that's a great. I think that's a great comparison there. So, another point, they've got one of the best spin blockers in the game with Pecharunt, but all they have to set hazards is Stealth Rock Jirachi and Lycanroc.
Yeah.
So there's no spikes. Wait, does Pecharunt get toxic spikes?
No.
I don't think it does, but I'm not sure.
I'm gonna do a quick check. But while I'm checking, what do you think about ranking this team?
So, me personally, I'm kind of leaning toward B, to be honest with you. And another thing that I wanted to bring up is like, it seems like there may be a little bit of a lack of immediate power on this team, because like you've got Darkrai, right? But like you've also got, I don't know. It seems like this team is just missing something to me. Like I can't. It's a little hard to put my finger on it, but it seems like there's a lot of little things wrong. It seems like there's a little bit of a synergistic problem with like you have Pokemon like Darkrai and Quaquaval that really, really want to be fast, and then you have all these other Pokemon like Ursaluna Bloodmoon, Enamorous Therian, for God's sake, like that would really, really, really benefit from Trick Room, So it just seems this team seems a little bipolar to me, to be honest with you guys. So I've had a hard time. This was probably the team of all of these that I had the hardest time putting my finger on it. But I think I'm thinking B, because there's a lot of little things about this team that I'm kind of iffy about. So I would go with B. What about you, Brandon?
Pretty much leaning towards that same direction, B, for all the aforementioned reasons. What do you think, Brandon?
I'm leaning towards B as well. For pretty much everything y'all have already pointed out.
Yeah,
I do think this team has a lot of potential. I will say that it's got a lot of potential, but there's definitely some strange synergy issues going on.
One thing that could help. I'll go ahead.
Because one thing I will give the Petrarunts credit, what I know it for doing the most in draft is just getting a parting shot on something and then just, pivoting out. And he does have 3 Mons, the Malshoal, the Quaquaval, and the Darkrai, even the Oricorio, for God's sake, that would benefit from having that extra turn to just set up and then potentially sweep. So that could be something he could do to overcome his lack of immediate power.
Yeah.
Just pointing
as
that
a
out.
hazards man, I think you use some hazards, some spikes, some T-spikes. But then also, I don't know, maybe a Slow King might help with the chilly reception trick room. And also as an ice resist. As just was thought.
Or
with that being said,
advice, but there you go.
Yeah. But we're gonna get into that concept with this next team. Is it my turn to start off? We're gonna get into HIM. So glad to have him back. He finally put together the Baxcalibur with the chilly reception Slowking Galar. And in addition to that, we got one of the best rapid spinners in my opinion, Excadrill, along with webs. Wow, look at this. All this cool stuff. We got the Eruption, Fire, Typhlosion, Iron Leaves. I know that when Scorpion saw this next at Thunderous Theory, he was like, oh snap. We've also got another rapid spinner in Blastoise, but it's good that it can go with it doesn't have to run rapid spin because you already got the Excadrill. So it gives you some options. We've also got Quagsire, great defensive unaware Pokemon, and Doxbun. So I really, really like this team, I'll be honest, guys. I really like the synergy between the Baxcalibur and the Slowking. I like that we've actually got a good amount of hazards. I'm pretty sure that Quagsire gets both Stealth Rocks and Spikes. Excadrill can also set Stealth Rocks. We've also got Sticky Web with Ribombee. The only unfortunate thing is I don't see any spin blocker. The only form of spin blocking is the Terra Ghost Doxbun. And we kind of really want to need that, especially because Sticky Web, that's the whole team format, is you want to get those webs up, but most importantly, keep them up. But there's not really any way to stop someone from just rapid spinning on you, which is a little bit of attraction. But even then, look at all this power. You got the Choice Scarf, Typhlosion, Terra Fire. You got the Baxcalibur. You got the Thunderous Theory. It hits super hard. So you got a lot of great physical breakers, a lot of great special breakers. You've got setup in both Dragon Dance Baxcalibur and Shell Smash Blastoise. You've got great defensive pivots in Quagsire and Wish Baton Pass Doxbun. Of course, Iron Leaves is not able to Terra, so I'm not sure how it's going to do this season. But I have used it before in the UNPL and made it to semifinals with it. And that's a semifinals where there's a pre-qualifying round, so I had to win 2 games to get it there. With that being said, though, I'll turn it over to Captain B-Nard to see his thoughts.
Fair enough. So, I would agree with you on the surface. I actually do really like this team. There's one big problem I have with it, but other than that, I got nothing but good things to say. So we'll start with the positive. There's a great balance on this team, offensively, defensively. Obviously, you've got powerhouses like the Baxcalibur, you've got the Excadrill, you've got the Ribombee, which actually does hit relatively hard. You've got the yes, and the Thunderous Therian, of course, Shell Smash Blastoise, the Typhlosion. There's a lot of power on this team. Absolutely a lot of power. There's a lot of utility on this team as well. Like you said, all the hazards in the world. Amazing. The chilly reception into the Baxcalibur is huge. Terra Captains are very well placed, in my opinion. I think this team probably has my favorite Terra Captain placement of anyone in the league, my own included, to be honest, because there are 3 very solid, very viable Terra Captains on this team that he could bring to any given week. So that amount of versatility is very, very good. I am very impressed with that. the one negative I have about this team, and it is a very big negative for me, but it, you know, take that as you will, because again, we'll go back to basics for me with the type interactions. He has a huge unchecked rock and a huge unchecked ghost weakness on this team. He's got zero ghost resists on this team, which is really a problem in my opinion, because ghost is one of the strongest types neutrally to hit things with. So the fact that he has 2 weaknesses and no resistances is a big problem for me type wise. He can't even Terra into a resistance on any of those Pokemon to ghost, so that's a big issue for me. And then the rock weakness, he's got, I want to say, I think it's 4 rock weaknesses and only 2 rock resistances, and that's the stealth rocks are going to eat this team alive if he can't get them off the field. But yeah, those are 2 types that you really don't want to be upside down on by that big of a margin. But other than that, I really love this team. I think it's a very solid team through and through. It's got pretty much everything you would want on a team. Just the type balance is really just not there for me. But other than that, what do you think about it, Brandon?
First and foremost, when I first saw this team, my immediate thought was, and HIM, I mean this the most respectful way possible, but my first thought was Baxcalibur and Slowking. This is a very, very evil man who just wants to watch the league burn. He just wants to watch the league burn. But, you know, all that aside, I did think this is like a very solid team, like from an offensive perspective, you know, because you get backs up under the chilly reception. Well, hey, that's what got him put in Ubers. This Typhlosion will always be a threat. The Iron Leaves, the Thunderous, you know, he has a lot of threats, and I agree with y'all that he has pretty great Terra captains, and the Terra types are just amazing. I did also find the same like little nitpick about the lack of ghost resists, which is, like you said, one of the most spammable types in the game. But there's something else that threw me off about this team as well. Oh, I remember what it was now. His only hazard removal, from what I can tell, is Rapid Spin. So if someone just has like a reliable ghost type, they can always spin block. Like they can spin block him pretty easily. But that was like my only real negative thought about the team. Because outside of that, I think the team is like a strong offensive team, and it has pretty great bulk. And if this Baxcalibur gets even one Dragon Dance up, and you're the one in front of it, hey, good luck. You're hearing it from me.
Fair enough.
I got one other point. I just ask, what is the purpose of Terra Psychic on the Darkspawn? The only thing I can think is for having stab Psychic Fangs.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't do anything defensively, right?
I'm trying to think.
It's tragic that you mentioned this ghost weakness, and 2 out of 3 Darkspawn's Terras are weak to ghost.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a better Terra type out there than Psychic for Darkspawn. I agree with you.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, but Steel's probably, if I had to imagine, it'd probably mostly be Steel, because it removes its primary weaknesses, and then it's also its ability makes it immune to fire. So that's what I can see happening there.
Ranking wise, what do you think in Emerald?
Okay, so ranking wise, I really like all the power of the team, but I think that unchecked ghost and rock weakness is what kind of drags it down to A for me. What do you guys think?
I would actually agree with that. Like, this is one of the most painful decisions for me, to be completely honest with you, because I was very on the fence about this team, and this team, if it did not have those massively unchecked weaknesses to rock and ghost, and not even the Terra types check those weaknesses for the most part, like, I would easily call this an S tier team if it wasn't for that. But to me, kind of, you know, again, going back to the well, the type interactions are so important to me, and when you're so weak to types like that can be a real Achilles heel. So that's that's why I think I have to agree with you. I think this has to go in A just because of those massively unchecked weaknesses to Ghost and Rock. What do you think, Brandon?
Weaknesses. I mean, even with the weaknesses that he has, because of like the Ghost weakness, for example, right? Everybody might not have a reliable. Well, everybody might not have a hard hitting Ghost type or a spammable option on their teams. And then with the Rock, I still feel like he has his ways to, play around that. And for those reasons, I am going to stick with what I originally thought, which is this is a S tier team. But, well, I already lost the war.
Well, sorry, bro, you're outvoted.
I take my L's
You've been outvoted. Yeah, no, I would. This is the most painful. This is the most painful A tier decision I've ever made, to be honest with you. Because, like I said, even if he was just upside down a little bit with those weaknesses, easy S tier, no problem. But to be that upside down,
I'll put it at the top of A tier.
Of the most potent offensive.
Yeah, even though these aren't really in order, but just know that, like I said, it was dragged down from S tier for me to A.
It was right there. It was right there. It was so close, but I just
very good team.
Weaknesses are
just another added thing. I think that the Mold Breaker Excadrill is gonna do great work. I think Mold Breaker is a great ability in this league, and for what we're about to show you right now, why? Because our next team is going to be coached by Al, the Athabasca Miltanks. So why don't you start us off, B-Nard?
I
can't wait for the ABCDEFG Tyranitars versus the ABCDEFG Miltanks. But I think Brandon gets this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't remember. Yeah. Take it away.
Take it away, Brandon.
All right. So we have the ABCDEFG. I mean, hold up. Oops. Let me start over. We have the Athabasca. Okay. Let's try this for the third time. All right, guys. I'm gonna get it this time. The Athabasca Miltanks. There we go. Oh, the flashbacks to Whitney. If you know, you mother freaking know. But anyway, this team has the Great Tusk. Oh, wait. I'm the one presenting this team? All right, you know what? I got this. He has the Great Tusk, the Clefairy, the Dragonite, the Heatran, Jolteon, Suicune, the Terra Captain. Oh, I forgot to mention that Jolteon was a Terra Captain. Pretty great Terra Captain, in my opinion. Terra Captain Vileplume, and then we have the Chinchino, Terra Captain Electric. Trike. Yeah, there's the Electrike, and then we have my Mortal Enemy, number 2, Reuniclus. Dang, that's why I can't say his name right. Can't stand this mon. Reuniclus. There we go. I remember when I
What's your mortal enemy number 1?
Necrozma.
Oh,
thank you.
Both psychic types, eh?
Yes.
Interesting.
And just to give y'all a little, I just don't like how Reuniclus never misses Focus Blast, and when it does hit, it just wants to knock things out. Even a Ting Lu, like, why you hit so hard, bro? But
can't relate. I've missed a lot of Focus Blast on it.
But when I first looked at this team, I just remember thinking to myself, like, this team is like bulky AF, because you have the Great Tusk, the Clefairy, the Dragonite with the multi-scale, the Heatran with between its ability and its typing is just bulky galore. Suicune, Vileplume, Reuniclus, just throw an AV on that thing and it just annoys you to death. I know from experience. And I don't know about Electrike, but I would assume a Violite makes it slightly bulky.
It's pretty good with a Violite and Terra.
True. So I'm familiar with 2 out of 3 of these Terra Captains, the Vileplume and the Jolteon, which I do think are pretty great Terra Captains. Also like the Terra options on Jolteon, and same for Vileplume. Not familiar enough with Electrike to talk about Electrike, but I'm assuming it's good if he drafted it. It's going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think this team is still also good offensively, like between the Jolteon, the Reuniclus. Heatran can be annoying. Dragonite, if it starts setting up on you, it can just end the game, especially if it's like late game and stuff like that. This team also, in my opinion, it's not going to be like an easy team to break, because if I'm not mistaken, pretty sure Electrike gets Levitate since it's evolution.
That is correct.
And then Dragonite can fly. So, good luck trying to kill that Heatran. And same for
That's why I said
trying to...
Excadrill would be very good for this team.
That is true. If you have Mold Breaker, hey, all power to you. But if you don't, hey, you're struggling just like me. But and the thing I just think is going to be annoying with this team, you have to get through the defense. You have to break the team, and then in the late game survive the offense, which I feel like is going to be a challenge for whoever plays Abomination. But overall, I think he has a pretty solid team. It's not as fast as I would like it to be, but that's just like a personal thing for me. I like the team to be a little bit faster, but I feel like this is a pretty solid team. Going to be hard to break, and it's going to still be strong offensively. Not a whole lot of passive mons on this team. What do you think about the team, Emerald?
So I really like that. In my opinion, I think Great Tusk ages Terapagos out to be the best rapid spinner in draft, just because it benefits so much from that speed boost, and it's so strong and bulky that it can really just put in work after just one rapid spin. I really like the Clefable. I've been using it to great effect, along with there's a Dragonite there that can Dragonites up. I think that they've got this nice little Dragon Fairy Steel Core here with the Heatran. There's also the bulky Suicune and the bulky Vileplume and the bulky the bulk just doesn't stop. Like you can't kill these mons. But they've also got some nice speed and Jolteon. Hit that base one or that speed tier of 130. Excellent Terra types. They've also got a Chinchino, which could tidy up. So that's pretty cool too for setup. So you basically have two Dragon Dancers essentially. And Electrike can coil and go for Supercell Slam, basically 100% accurate afterwards, and then be pretty bulky. Only real detraction I see is, let me see, so Great Tusk, Clefable, these guys all get Stealth Rocks. I'm not really seeing any of the spikes, but that's not really a requirement. There's no Spin Blocker though, there's no Ghost type. But I don't think that's the biggest deal in the world. I don't know. You'll probably correct me if I'm wrong, B-Nard, but I don't really see too many glaring type weaknesses. I'll turn it over to B-Nard and see what they say.
Yeah, so let me just say off the cuff, super impressed with this team. I will say Abomination has been a friend of mine on Discord for a long time. We've been in draft leagues in the past before. This team is pretty incredible, I have to say. So the first thing I want to say is just the power, like the absolute power that's on this team with the Great Tusk, the Dragonite, the Heatran, the Jolteon, like just the absolute power that this team has. But additionally, the defensive backbone of this team is one of, if not the best in the league right now, in my opinion, because you have that really strong Dragon Fairy Steel Core with Clefable, Dragonite, Heatran. You've got a very strong Fire Water Grass Core too with Heatran, Suicune, Vileplume. You've got the Terra Captains that are very well placed, and as Brandon said, not only very well placed, but the specific types that he's chosen for both Jolteon and Vileplume are amazing. For Electrike, despite the fact that it's a 2-point not fully evolved Pokemon, I do see that thing putting in work potentially. With having no weaknesses like its evolution, Electros doesn't, and its stats are actually not. I had to look this up, but they're actually not too much lower than Electros's. So that thing with an Eviolite as a Terra Captain could probably put in some work. I don't know about the types that it has aside from Electric makes sense, but I don't know about the other Terra types. But that's just a nitpick. On the negative side, the only little negatives I have about this team are, to kind of feed to what you were leading me into, Emerald, is that this team does have a little bit of an unchecked ice weakness. But other than that, it is pretty balanced. And that's just, that's not, that little bit of an ice weakness is not the end of the world given the kind of bulk that you have, like Pokemon that not only resist, but take those ice attacks neutrally even, like Clefable. Very impressive. Additionally, I would say that there is a little bit of a lack of priority on this team, I think, too, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe the only priority on here is Extreme Speed Dragonite.
It's Quick Attack Jolteon.
Well, if you want to get technical, yes, quick attack is beyond, but Extreme Speed Dragonite is obviously one of the better priority attacks in the game. But still, I would like to see a little more priority on this team. But other than that, I think there's just a couple of minor things that I have that are negative. Like I said, the priority and the little bit of an ice weakness are pretty much the only negatives I have. But overall, I'm extremely impressed with this team. Like the defensive core on this team, combined with the amount of damage output that this team can get to, and the Terra Captain placement is just incredible to me. I think he can go really, really far with this team, in my opinion. And I'll just save time right now and say I think this team deserves to be S ranked. That's just me personally. I think all bias aside, because this man has not so much been a side-by-side pal to me as more of a friendly rival over the years, and with good reason. In Pokemon, but this team is just very impressive to me. So I would call it an S tier team. But what do you guys think?
I agree. I mean, for me, like, I believe that the YCL we were both back in BDSP was my first draft league that I actually recorded for YouTube, and they sniped my Mew, and so ever since then, it's just always been in the background. Like, oh man, I got my Mew sniped by this guy, and he beat me with it in the first week. And I've just been thinking about this man ever since then, and it's because of him that I have improved so much in draft. And now to finally be able to face him here in week 9, I can't wait for that. And yeah, I definitely agree. All those bulky Pokemon, not only bulky but very strong, potent Pokemon, potent sweepers, definitely S tier. What do you think, Brandon?
It's an S tier team because, like I said, it's going to be a very tough team to break. And even if you do somehow start to make progress, you still have to deal with the offense, which is the scariest part to me. You break the team just to get stared down by the offense, and it's like, good luck. But yeah, definitely S tier.
All right, there we go. Okay, we're rounding out the coaches here. So let's move on now to Stefan, coach of the Grand Lake Garchomps. So I'll start us off. So we're looking over here. We finally got Stefan having his mascot, Garchomp himself. We've also got Samurott with Cecil's Edge. They traded in for the Urshifu single strike, so bunch of 3 just potent physical breakers. We've also got Decidueye, Rotom Heat, Tauros, the Cantonian version, which is Terra Captain, Braviary, Hisui. We've also got Diancie, Monkey Dory, and Orthworm. So we'll just start off by saying I think this man might have more hazards than I do. So that's pretty impressive.
I think you might be right about that.
Yeah. So they've got Stealth Rock Spikes on Garchomp. I think that Orthworm gets both Stealth Rocks and Spikes, and then Diancie Stealth Rocks, Samurott's the Cecil's Edge. We've also got Raging Bull. I had to look this up, but the Kanto version also gets Raging Bull, like it's what's the Paldean versions? And so you don't necessarily have to rely on defog if you're worried about removing those pesky screens. But they also have defog on the Decidueye if they wanted to do that. Like I said, a lot of good physical breakers. They've also got the Tinted Lens on or potential Sheer Force Braviary Hisui, which can put in some work for sure. Monkey Dory is also a very good special breaker. I think it has like base 130 or something like that. But then their walls, they've got a Terra Diancie, which is great to Terra out of that 4x steel weakness. Rotom Heat can be a solid wall. It also has Levitate and Orthworm. Although Orthworm, I've seen it put in much more use as a Terra Captain, honestly. But Orthworm still with that massive physical defense stat should be pretty solid. Maybe you just slap an Assault Vest on one of your other Pokemon and you can have a pretty good physical and special wall. Overall, though, I think this is a pretty good team. They've also actually got a solid Ghost type switching. I mean, it's not the best spin blocker, but it is still a good spin blocker into Decidueye for all these hazards that they clearly intend to set up. In terms of speed tiers, though, if I'm not mistaken, I think the speed tiers are a little bit lacking. I don't think that they have a Pokemon over base 110, which could be a little bit of a problem, but They've also got a good amount of. They've got 2 Sucker Punch Mons, actually 3. Hang on. So decent amount of priority. Yeah, I think my only detraction is I just wish the team was a little bit faster. But what do you think, B-Nard?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a good team, I think, on paper. So, as you mentioned, number one, we have to say hazard stacking is the biggest feature of this team. I think I agree with you. I think this team is capable of setting hazards. I think more than just about any other in the league. There was one other one that I can't remember who it was at this point because we've been doing this a while. But yeah, no, hazard stacking is incredible on this team. Kind of goes hand in hand with the utility. There's a lot of handy utility options on this team with, for the same reasons with hazard stacking. So you have the Garchomp, the Hisuian,
Samurott.
blanking on the name. Hisuian Samurott, there we go. But you've also got the Decidueye, you've got the Rotom, you've got the Earthworm. As someone who's used Earthworm a lot in draft in the past, it's certainly not what it used to be. I'll say that. It's a solid defensive steel type, but unfortunately, I said this before and I'll say it again, with the addition of the DLCs, Earthworm has really lost a lot of its luster, I think. But aside from that, I will also say I think the Terra Captains are extremely well placed on this team. Not only the placement, but also specifically which Terra types. So Tauros pretty much has the perfect 3 in normal fighting Ghost. For anything you would ever want to do with it, and then Diancie, Steel fighting, Water, a good one too, to mitigate some of those weaknesses, or a lot of those weaknesses from its Rock Fairy typing. The negatives that I have for this team, first and foremost, are there is a bit of an unchecked fighting and Ghost weakness on this team. So I think he's upside down by like 3-2 on Ghost weaknesses, and I think the same, if not a little more, on fighting weaknesses. Now he does have good switch-ins for those as well, but still as a raw number, he's upside down on those 2 types, which is a little bit of a problem for me. But also there's not really much of one of the problems I think I have with this team is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a rapid spinner on this team. He has Decidueye gets Defog, and I think, does Braviary get Defog too? Hisuian Braviary? I think it does.
Let me double check that.
It does.
Yeah.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. He's got defoggers, but he's got no rapid spinners, and he's got all the ability in the world to set all these hazards on the board. But then if he has to get rid of hazards, he's just going to remove his own hazards. So that's kind of a problem for me. That's a little
classic catch-22.
Exactly. So normally, I know Emerald, you're a big fan of rapid spin over defog for the most part because you don't like the idea of removing your own hazards.
Undoing my work.
I don't think. Yes, and I agree with that sentiment. But me personally, I think you can kind of play around that unless your team is like hazard stack heavy.
Yeah, unless it's this.
In which case. Yes, unless it's this. So that's what I'm trying to say is like I don't see a way that he plays around. Not undoing his own work, as you said. So that's kind of a synergistic problem for me. I think if he had a couple of rapid spinners or like instead of the defoggers, or at least one rapid spinner, one defogger, I would say that would be a lot more synergistic. But that I could see being an issue for him. And then I would agree with you as far as the speed goes. I do think this team doesn't have great speed tiers. This might actually be do any of these Pokemon have over base 100 speed? I don't know that they do.
Monkey Dory is 106.
And what is
Garchomp?
What is Tauros base speed?
Oh, that's right. Tauros is faster than Paldean, so I think that does crack 110.
Yeah. So, but even granted that, I still am not impressed with the fact that there's nothing faster on this team. But other than that, I do agree there's good priority and whatnot. But yeah, there's definitely a few issues with this team, but it is still pretty solid overall. But what do you say, Brandon?
I played this team this week, so I'm gonna keep my opinions to myself. But I do think this is an A tier. Just want to throw that out there.
Fair enough.
Okay, with that being said, so we already have Brandon throwing his hat in the ring for A tier. I was thinking the same thing. I think I like a lot of the power. I think just all those detractions are kind of what brings it down. Let me see. Let me take a look at their special attackers. So yeah, we got the Monkey Dory, the Nasty Cloud Rotom, the Tinted Lens Braviary. Yeah. So yeah, they're good on all that. I think it's just they could use a rapid spinner and maybe just a little bit of the type. Oops, there's the timer. the types.
Yes, I would agree. I would call this an A tier team as well, just because they have a lot of things going for them, but they also do have those unchecked weaknesses, and they also do have a few synergistic problems. So I'm pretty comfortable saying.
So, with that, we are coming down to it, folks. We are going to get into our next coach, Arcaniner. B-Nard, why don't you start us off?
Will do. So, of course, we have Arcaniner here, and we have his team on the screen as well. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. So from top to bottom here, we are going to be looking at a Latias, a Weavile, a Donphan. I wanted, but it's all good. Entei, Inteleon as a Terror Captain, which I think is a great idea. Tross, which I also wanted as a Terror Captain, which is also a great idea, I think. Yeah, no, the Levitators. I love the Levitators. You figured me out. But yes, we have the Gengar, which used to be a Levitator. We have the Lucario, the Venusaur, and unfortunately, of course, the Wigglytuff, which. But overall,
that Arcaniner has Inteleon, because it seems like he was really the sniper of this draft.
I was just gonna say he sniped a lot of people this draft, but it worked out for him, because I do have a lot of positive things to say about this team. I think number one, I want to say the power that this team has is pretty impressive. So you have stuff that hits really hard, like the Weevil hits hard, the Entei hits hard, the Gengar hits hard, the Lucario hits hard, the Latias and the Inteleon can hit hard, the Electros can hit hard as well, with just a little bit of a setup as well. So there's a lot of power behind this team. There's a lot of priority behind this team too. So you have two premier extreme speed users with the Lucario and the Entei, obviously. You've got the Ice Shard Donphan, of course, and Weavile as well with Ice Shard. So a lot of premier priority on this team. It is a very balanced team as far as offense and defense go. There's a lot of bulky offense I see on this team, which again I'm partial to. As I alluded to before, I think the Terra Captains are very well placed, specifically type-wise on the Electros, but type-wise on the Inteleon as well to a lesser extent. But yeah, very, very, very solid team through and through here. I guess my negatives would be I think there's a little bit of a lack of ability to set hazards on this team, because you got the Donphan that sets, and that's, I don't know, does Lucario get Stealth Rock too?
No, it's just that and Wigglytuff, I think.
That and Wigglytuff, yeah. So he only really has two Pokemon that can set, and they both set the same hazard. So that's not the most optimal thing in the world, but it's not the end of the world. Additionally, there's a little bit of an unchecked ground weakness on this team, because he's got...
Even with two Levitators, he still has an unchecked ground weakness?
Yeah, yes, he does, because he's got the Gengar, he's got the Entei, and he's got the Lucario.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
no flying
even
types.
Despite the two Levitators, yes, no flying types, no grass types. Well, Venusaur, but poison cancels it, and no bug types. So, but still a little bit upside down. I'm telling you, man, the Levitate is the way, because those ground weaknesses get you.
If you just had a flying type, anyway, you'd be good.
You'd be even, yeah. If one of these was a flying type, you'd be even. But yeah. So he's a little bit. But then again, that's not the end of the world. A little bit under. But overall, I think this is a very, very well put together team. But what are you thinking, Emerald?
I'm thinking that I see this Venusaur, but there's no sun. I'm just like, I really wish that I could have some sun to abuse, because I feel like with the Entei and the Venusaur, and I think even Latias with like a Weather Ball set would be cool for the pesky steals. I just think that'd be a cool idea. But without the sun, I just think Venusaur maybe could be something else. But that's just me. Could use some more hazards. The Terra types are excellent though. I mean, Terra Electros is a great Pokemon with the fire. Although I was expecting either steel or poison on this. It's interesting that they're fighting, but I guess for the stab close combats. And I mean, Terra Inteleon is probably one of the best ones that we're talking about, right up there with Articuno Galar when we were planning. We almost didn't want to do it, but we ended up just barely letting it pass. So now we're allowing Terra Water potential crit snipe shots going off. So that's going to hit pretty hard. Or even with Ice Beams, it's going to be very good. So with that, what do you...
Drain Punch on the stab.
Drain Punch Electros, good call, yeah.
That might help it live. That's going to help it live quite a bit.
That'll help, for sure. What are you thinking, Brandon?
Whenever I first looked at this team, I thought it was, initial thought was this has a lot of great offensive mons like the Weavile, the Entei, the Inteleon, the Lucario, even the Gengar. Pretty great priority too with the because once again you got the Weavile. Lucario's known for his priority, Entei, and even Inteleon gets some priority moves like Vacuum Wave, Aqua Jet, and for whatever reason, Donphan gets Ice Shard. I'll never understand why Donphan can generate
from the Ice Age. I don't know. It was a fossil. I don't know.
It is one of the great mysteries of Pokemon, I think.
The Kikero can't. But one thing I did think though when I first looked at the team was just like, I guess I just had a tough time like figuring out what the walls were like in regards to like the physical or the I mean, I know Latios can be a special wall, but at the same time I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just underestimating Latios a little bit. But
yeah. Well, I think the thing is with Latios, usually you'd rather be invested in speed and special attack and not necessarily Spadef.
Yeah, and then his physical wall, I mean
he's got Donphan, but...
And Entei's respectable, but it's still...
Wigglytuff has a high HP. It can be bulky.
True.
We know. I was expecting you to air a few more grievances about not getting that Wigglytuff Emerald, but, yeah, I guess you've moved on.
I've gone through the 7 stages of grief. I've accepted it.
Arcanine,
if you ever want to trade it, though, I'd be down. Just let me know.
I was so set. I just have to say this as a sidebar. I was had my heart set on Emerald being the one to carry the legacy of the Joey Fontaine Wigglytuff. Because I was ready.
I was ready to name it Joey Fontaine.
Yeah, that makes me die on the inside even a little more because I wanted to see that so bad. Because I've been the only man to draft Wigglytuff all 4 seasons. I've drafted it 2. It went undrafted in 1. And no one's drafted it. And I was so ready for Emerald to pick up that torch of the Wigglytuff, and then it was taken away. But it's okay. Maybe Arcaniner can carry the torch of the Joey Fontaine Wigglytuff into the.
But overall, I think this is a great team. My only real negative I think I had with the team was unless I'm just not seeing something, I think his only hazard remover is Donphan, which all right.
That's a good one though. I mean, because you run sturdy, heavy duty boots, and it has knockoff. I mean, from what I've seen, this is like one of the bane of my existences. In terms of, it always seems to remove my hazards every time I face it. So this is one of the best ones if you can get it.
I was gonna say Donphan is the king of utility. As far as ranking goes, I'll be honest with you guys. I'm a little torn, but I'm actually kind of thinking this is an S tier team, and the biggest reason I want to say that is because of the lack of negative things I have to say about it. Like, it's got a little bit of a ground weakness, it's got 1 hazard remover, but like, it's got so much else going for it. It's got so much power. It's so well balanced. Terra Captains are so perfect. So I'm honestly thinking S, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, they've got such great speed tiers with Weavile and Inteleon. They've got great setup with the SD Weavile, the SD Lucario, the priority, the spinning.
So
they even got a spin blocker, even though it's not the best spin blocker, but it still is one. Yeah, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of detraction. I guess the only thing would be I would like to see some spikes, but that's not a requirement. So, yeah, I mean, what are you thinking, Brandon? I'm between S and A.
I'm leaning towards S because even though I don't like the idea that there's only 1 hazard clearer, it will remove or lose.
It's one of the best ones.
That, and when I'm going through like my pros and cons of the team, that was literally my only con. He has 1 hazard remover. That's like literally the only
what I'm saying.
I can say. So it's like,
I mean, in a 16-person league, it's realistically, it's difficult to get two good ones. He's got a good one.
Me, it's just the lack of negative things I have to say about this team is what really pushes it there for me.
Yeah. My only thing is, I think this Venusaur is a little bit out of place. I think maybe you could get a better either defensive Pokemon or something like that. And also, if you get a grass type that's not poison, then it helps out with your ground weakness. So there's that.
Indeed.
Yeah, I don't know. Because it's tier to me, like I just don't see any like. There's no Iron Valiant, no Dragapult. But then again, the Iron Valiant and Dragapult teams haven't made it to S either. So I guess if we're going with the rule of there's no real detractions, I'm okay with putting it at like lower tier S. Just because there's not much we could say that's bad about it.
That's like I said, like the team has so much going for it. My personal opinion is the team has so much going for it. And I really don't have much of anything bad to say about it, so that's my logic.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we're gonna move on to our own commissioner here, Brandon. So I'll start us off. We got Urshifu Rapid once again. You've got going back to season 2 here with the Urshifu Cinderace. Of course, Cinderace is there every time. But then look at this. We've got Whimsicott, Archaludon, Thundurus. I wonder where I've seen that before, Brandon. And then only that, we've got the Fortress and then Sylveon Flygon. But then Fortress and Alolan Muck. Very interesting choices here, Brandon. And then, of course, every season, the Pikachu. I like these Terra Captains. I like the Terra Flygon, the Levitate with the Terra Steel. You can Dragon Dance up on those pesky fairy types, not have to worry about it. And then you have a Steel Stab now to be able to take them out. Also, Terra Whimsicott. I guess this is more of like for an offensive Whimsicott because ground, water, steel. Whimsicott's not really designed to take a lot of hits, but you can slap a choice specs on it, but trick, and use maybe some of these moves for that. I am interested in what you're going to use these terrors for. But you've got
We've seen the scholar himself do that before, so
that's what I'm saying. I remember seeing this. I've seen the specs Terra Ground before on the Whimsicott, so. We've got the Rapid Spinner in the Fortress, but they can also use Court Change Cinderace if they want to. But they've got plenty of hazards set up with Stealth Rocks from Archaludon and from Fortress, as well as Spikes. Of course, Alolan Muck doesn't get T-Spikes. That's one of the only things that differentiate it from regular Muck, but it does have Stab Knockoff.
That's where I was crossing wires before, actually. As with the T-Spikes, is it's Muck that where the standard one gets T-Spikes and the regional variant doesn't. Not.
That's correct.
So there's my correction.
Yep. So a lot of strong breakers. Like look at this Urshifu Cinderace, but then you've also got some special breakers like the Archaludon and even Thundurus with Nasty Plot can go on. Even Sylveon with Calm Mind can put in some work too. And of course, I've used Fortress and Muck as the defensive pivots in the past. I will say though, I hate to it just keeps coming up. Well, you know what? I'll let that be it for me, and I'll let B-Nard get into the type matchup. That's his thing.
All right. Here we go. Yes, that is my thing. So, I have to say I'm very impressed with the Brandon has put together here. There is a great balance of offense and defense. So you've got the Urshifu Rapid Strike into Cinderace. Incredible powerhouses, obviously, on the physical side. You've got Thundurus. You've got the Archaludon. Obviously, you've got the Sylveon, pretty powerful. I like the utility on this team because Whimsicott obviously is a lot of utility. Alolan Muck is pretty solid as well. And then, of course, the Fortress. We can't forget about that when we're talking about utility, hazard setting and removing and whatnot. The Terra Captains, I think, are very well placed on this team. I think the Flygon specifically is a big one for me because Flygon is one of those Pokemon that it feels like it's just there, like it's just almost there all the time, and it just needs something to push it over the edge to make it great. So I think that having Terra on Flygon is pretty great. And then again, there's the there's the electric, or I should say the Levitator with the Terra. Is that what you were setting me up for?
Oh, well, that you'll get into it later.
Terra Electric Levitator, so gotta love that. So the negatives I have to say on this are number one, there is a bit of an unchecked ground weakness on this team. Yes, even despite the
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yes, despite the Levitator, despite the Whimsicott, which is not the bulkiest Pokemon in the world, and even despite, yes, the Thundurus, there is quite a bit of ground weakness on this team. A little bit unchecked. So there's that. And then additionally, I'm going to say something that I've made it almost to the end of the video without saying. So Ray, you better get ready to take a shot of vodka. Because of the Pikachu, this roster does feel a little shallow to me. I have to say it. Because you got all these other teams with all these viable Pokemon on them. And I'm not saying Pikachu is totally not viable, because we've seen Brandon bring it before, to his detriment, I might add, but he has brought it before in seasons past. But I have to say that because Pikachu is Pikachu, it seems like a little bit of a liability. Obviously, I get it. It's a Pokemon he loves. He wanted to bring it. He made it a Terra Captain, which actually does increase the viability of it. But the Pikachu makes the roster feel a little shallow compared to some of these other teams. But other than that, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I do think it's a really solid team overall. But what do you think in Emerald as far as ranking goes?
Yeah, I was just gonna say one more thing just to kind of get further
Yeah.
into that his switch-ins to Earthquake realist, like the Fortress is like I think his best defensive Pokemon other than our Chaladon, but neither of them really appreciates an Earthquake. His only Earthquake switch-ins are the Flygon, and the Thundurus. But let's say they make a prediction and then they chip them down. So now there's not really a whole lot of switch-ins. Whimsicott can't particularly take it either. So that's why I was saying I just think if they had a good defensive Pokemon that like resisted ground,
Take it.
I think that would be
Yeah,
quite
that would help.
that would help. So yeah, so in
Yes.
terms of ranking it though, this is an absolute powerhouse of a team. They've got all these strong breakers on both sides of the spectrum.
Absolutely.
With that being said, because of the aforementioned weaknesses and the Pikachu though, I am thinking the top of A.
Yeah, it's really tough for me, honestly. I'm very torn about this team because I want to, like, the Pikachu is really throwing me. Like, I know you had to do it, Brandon. I understand you had to do it. I get it. But like, I want to. I'm so close to saying this is an S tier team. Like, it feels like it has so much going for it in terms of utility, in terms of power. Like the combination of power and utility on this team is amazing to me. It's really hard for me to decide between S rank and A rank. To be completely honest with you, if I were pressed, I would, as weird as this sounds, I would probably still give this an S tier rank, to be honest, just because
Really?
I
Wow.
think
Even with all
I
those
think
ground type weaknesses.
yes, even with that little bit of a ground weakness, and even with the Pikachu, I feel like I want to say this is an S tier. As of that, there's so much utility on this team, and there's so much power on this team that I feel like that overshadows the Pikachu. So I don't know. I feel like we actually, as much as we hate to say it, I think we need Brandon to weigh in here between the two of us. So what say you, Brandon? How would you peg your own?
Well, I would give there's two things I want to say. To answer the question, I would give my team an A tier. I would give it an A tier. Second thing I want to say, everybody who's heard this slander for Pikachu, the day I post a result and you see, even if it's just one, and it says Pikachu, just know, mission accomplished for the season, and I don't want no one to tell me nothing. But hey, that's all you.
Well, I say
Yeah,
you do have that Terra Normal on there, so I'm assuming we're going to see some Terra Normal fake out quick attack shenanigans.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think I will definitely change my vote to side with you guys if that's the case, because yeah, it's so close. This is definitely one of the closest ones for me. Yeah, I would not argue with A. I think A.
Just one other distraction just to kind of keep it in line because this team also does not have a spin blocker. It's got some great ways to set hazards like our Chaladon and Fortress, and you can also court change the opposing hazards, but there's no way to keep them up. Although I guess, I mean, no. Well, they've got the court change Cinderace, but that's it. So with that,
Never understood that.
Brandon, since we skipped you doing your own team, why don't you start us off with Beardew's team?
Fair to me.
Gotta clear my throat. You know, y'all have me on a very long hiatus. So
We're
with
getting to the home stretch.
with the ABCD. Oh, hold on. Gotta put my contacts back in.
We gave them both to you, I guess. We didn't. That was not on purpose, by the way. We didn't give both A, B, C, D, E, F, G teams to you on purpose, but
Oh yeah.
it happened that way.
I need to grab my binoculars for this one. Okay, now it's Atacama Tyranitars, coached by Beardew, also known as Beardew from the Discord server. If you know him, you know him. So his team consists of Iron Treads, Chi-Yu. He has good taste. Ogerpon Wellspring, Salamence, the Azumarill, Terra Captain Kilowattrel, which I think is one of the best Terra Captains. Uxie, the Terra Captain Muck, gotta respect it. Hatterene, which is one of my favorite Pokemon, let me say. And the Terra Mischievous. Gotta respect it, because didn't he have... Wait, no, he didn't. He didn't have Mischievous last season. I don't know why I feel like he did.
No, well, you have it in season 1.
That's what it was.
Gotta say, this looks kind of
Yeah,
familiar.
I only remember because I had the clip of it skill swapping the Ursaluna.
Oh, that sounds disrespectful. but one thing I will say about this team, though, first and foremost, I'm so happy that Vera got his fish, because he was talking about that fish for like... He was just talking about it. He was so happy to get it. But
Changed his profile picture and everything.
But one thing I will say about his team and this fish, good luck hitting that thing with a water attack, because you have the water absorb Ogerpon, you have Salamence, which resists water, you have freaking Azumarill. I thought this team was pretty strong offensively, because you have the Chi-Yu, you have the Iron Treads, the Ogerpon, Salamence with... Oh, why'd I say it's not a sandwich? Salamence, which can also run Moxie, and this thing can just snowball and just be crazy. Azumarill is always an offensive threat. Same with Kilowattrel, even Hatterene. So yeah, I think it seems pretty offensively threatening. I also think his team has pretty good bolt, because you know Iron Treads, it's typing, and then it's just its stats overall, just pretty bulky mon. Same with Hatterene on that special side, Mischievous with the Eviolite. He has pretty good bulk to his team. Same with the Muck, the Uxie, which just has sky high defenses from what I can remember. I feel like he has pretty good Terra Captains too, with the Kilowattrel and the Mischievous. I'm not sleeping on Muck. I just don't know enough about Muck. I just know he stinks. That's all I know. But overall, I think he has a pretty good team, and I can't wait to see what he does with it. What do you think, Emerald?
Yeah, so overall, when I see this team, I don't know about y'all, I just get scared on the inside. I'm scared of this Chi-Yu, and I'm scared of the
How scared is
Salamence.
that?
Yes, one might say scared. Yes, and this Azumarill, which can belly jump, and also this Ogerpon, which can SD Trailblaze in my face. But they're not on top of that. They've also got great defensive pivots in the Uxie and the Muck, which pair very well together. In addition to Hatterene, and even the Mischievous if they were to bring that. So, and also, I mean, the Ogerpon and the Azumarill are decently bulky in their own right, as well as Iron Treads, one of the best rapid spinner. You know, in my opinion, all three of those, the Dawn family, they're all some of the best rapid spinners, along with Terapagos and Excadrill, in my opinion. Um, and also one of the best Terra Captains in Kilowattrel. I mean, I'm gonna pass it over to B-Nard to see the type matchups, but in my opinion, this team is looking like one of the best.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. So, first thing I want to say about this team is I really like the speed control on this team. So there are a lot of Pokemon on this team that are quite fast. So you've got the Chi-Yu, obviously. You've got the Ogerpon Wellspring. You've got the Salamence. You've got the Kilowattrel as a Terra Captain, which is a great choice in my opinion. Those Terra types are also very well placed, I think, on there. Um,
Boost your energy
the
shreds.
Iron Treads. Yes, I was going to say the Iron Treads is deceptively fast as the Iron Treads. You've also got a lot of power on this team, like you guys said. There is a lot of power on this team with the Iron Treads, the Chi-Yu, the Ogerpon, the Salamence, the huge power / Belly Drum Azumarill. The whole top row is just power. Also, I would say the Terra captains are very well placed, as I had mentioned before. Of course, I think the Muck and the Mischievous is. I'll get to that in a second. But the Muck, obviously being a Terra Captain and alongside the Kilowattrel, I am a big fan of that. And then specifically, most of the Terra types on the Muck, I think, are good ones. Of course, being the Flying in the Dark that create the weaknesses for immunities, which is always good. The Mischievous, that feeds into one of the second things I have to say, or on the flip side, there are a couple of negatives I have about this team. The first one, and they unfortunately for Biridu, they both stem from the Mischievous essentially, and that is number one, that this team has a pretty big unchecked ghost weakness. So they have 3 ghost weaknesses and only 1 resist, and their resist is a very, very frail fifth. So that is a problem in my opinion. Now, if he were to just, and I know again, same thing I'm going to say that I said with Brandon, I get it, you had to do it, I understand. But if that Mischievous was just like a low point instead of a Mischievous, problem solved. But unfortunately for him, he can't even Terra out, really. I mean, I guess the Muck.
Yeah, he's got the Muck.
To help some Terra out of the ghost weakness, so that's a positive. But the ghost weakness is a bit of a problem, and additionally, this is the second and final time I'm going to say this. So I should say, Ray, get your vodka ready again. This roster, due to the fact that the Mischievous is on it, feels a little bit shallow. But only because of the Mischievous. But other than that, I have to say I'm very, very impressed with this team. I do think it is one of the best, despite those 2 nitpicks I have. I do think this is one of the best teams in the league this season, and I'll just cut to the chase and say that I think it should be S tier. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I was gonna say this is definitely S tier, just because I feel scared when I look at it. Very scary.
If you feel quote scared, yes, if you feel quote scared, it's got to be an S. Brandon?
I share the same sentiment. I think this is a S tier team.
There you go.
All right. So with that, I accidentally dragged to best team and I can't get it out. So we'll put you in a position here soon, buddy. I just wanted to say one other thing. I think that if you put I think that Komala is still available if you want to swap it out for Mischievous, but I understand why you want that.
There's not a chance in hell Biridu will do that, but if we're giving more unsolicited advice, I actually do think that would be a good idea.
But one other thing I want to say, just in case you were worried about, because he got all these physically offensive Pokemon, he's got the Kilowattrel and the Hatterene, and indeed, there is a Chi-Yu on this team, so no worry about not having any special breakers. So, our last team is going to be the best, not really, the Piercing Pawniards. Why don't you finish this off, Cap?
Yes, I will, and this is quite ironic because this is my week 1 opponent. But unlike Brandon, I am not quote scared to take this on, so I will give you my full opinion of this team. It may come back to screw me, but you know what? That is the price of entertainment. So here we go. The best, not really, and the Piercing Pawniard. So as you can see, top to bottom, he's got the Kyurem, he's got the Gliscor, he's got, of course, because he has to, the Hisuian at Zoroark, he's got the Empoleon, the Kicks, the Hisuian Electrode as a Terra Captain, which is great, obviously great. Then he's got the Cresselia, the Hawlucha, the Pheasantipity, and the Terra Captain Dragonair. So, positive things off the top I see are this team has, one of the things that jumped out to me, I should say, is this team has quite a bit of setup potential. So you can set up with the Kyroom, you can set up with the Gliscor, you can set up with the Hisuian Zoroark, you can set up with the Cresselia. It kind of goes on and on. You can set up with the Dragonair even. So there's a lot of setup potential on this team, which is a plus to me because your opponent's always going to have to be careful of, you know, where you're coming from, especially with that Hisuian Zoroark with that disguise, obviously. So, or illusion, I should say. So you're never going to be quite sure what's in. We've seen DeBest use the Hisuian Zoroark, I think, pretty much every season at this point. So yeah, that's always something to watch out for. I think the Terra Captains are well chosen because of the Hisuian Electrode. I will not sleep on Dragonair because I think Eviolite, Terra Normal, Extreme Speed Dragonair could really put in work, in my opinion. So I will not sleep on that thing one bit, actually. But yeah, those are pretty big positives to me. On the flip side, I do think there are some notable negatives of this team, and the first one I want to point out is this team has a very large ice and fairy weakness unchecked. So a lot of weaknesses to fairy, a lot of weaknesses to ice. Not a lot of answers to that stuff on this team aside from Empoleon, so I think he's going to lean very heavily on Empoleon as part of the defensive core to try and take hits, because those are pretty big weaknesses that he's got. Additionally, the other big negative I have about this team is that, and this is one criticism that I didn't have of any other team, and I think this is the only team this season we can say this about, there are a lot of wasted Terra points on the board for him.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is he's got the Hisuian Electrode at 8 points. He's got the Dragonair at 2 points. That brings you to 10. You're allowed to have up to 3 Terra Captains, and you're allowed to use 16 Terra points, which means that he's got 6 unused Terra points on the board here. And that is a huge negative for me, to be honest with you guys, because that to me speaks to a little bit of a lack of planning as far as the draft goes. Because if he wanted the Hisuian Electrode, if he wanted the Dragonair, which who knows if he did or not, he easily could have drafted a very viable 6-point Pokemon alongside the two of those and made that his last Terra Captain. So the lack of budgeting those Terra points is a huge negative for me, combined with those big ice and fairy weaknesses. But I'll throw it over to you for more, Brandon. What do you think?
Well, first and foremost, I think his team is very annoying when I look at it, because, you know, Gliscor can be annoying. Cresselia, well, hopefully my season 2 shenanigans don't come back to bite me in the butt. Pheasantipity could be annoying, low kicks. Like, yeah, even the Kyurem, because if you read, like, if you try to switch out on it and get the turn wrong, sub Kyurem is definitely a very common thing. Like, when I look at this team, it's just so annoying to look at. But it's because I find it so annoying that I just know this is a great team, like, offense. Like, this is a great this is a great team to offensively. It's not one-dimensional, which is probably why I find it so annoying. I feel like he has good bulk with, like, the Gliscor, the Cresselia, the Empoleon, the Pheasantipity, the Violite, Dragonair. And then because I know we say we're not going to take player skill into account, which I'm not when I give my tiering, but I do just want to say I can see just from how well he's been a trickster over the past few seasons, I can just see how he can really catch some people with these mons, because, you know what, I'm going to get into it. I can just see how he can catch some people off guard, because he is a very creative player from what we've seen. And I feel like he has some respectable Terra Captains, but I do have to agree. Would have been cool to see if he could have budgeted those other 6 points into something else. But at the same time, mate, you never know what he's cooking. You just know the house ain't going to burn down. That's all you know. And I feel like his team has good. I feel like he has good type synergy as well. And overall, I think it's a great team. What about you, Emerald?
Okay. I think I'll give a little bit of unsolicited advice here. I think one thing you can do is exchange this Hawlucha for a nice little Terra Flamigo. and use those extra points you save to get something else other than a Dragonair. Perhaps a fire type, because I don't see a fire type. And I think having a fire type is a good idea in draft because look at how many people were dying to get those steals. Of course, I mean Flamingo can hit the steals, but something like a Corviknight, might be tough. But if you got you also got the Electrode, but I just like having a nice little fire water grass core. And right now the fire part of that is absent. So
that would help those ice and fairy weaknesses that he's got a problem with for sure.
yeah, so that's one thing. Yeah, but in terms of the actual Pokemon, yeah, they've got a lot of strong Pokemon like the Kyurem and the Zoroark to break, as well as the Hawlucha. The Pheasantipede is a nice spit off wall. That pairs very well with the Gliscor, nice defensive wall. This low kicks can be scary with the tinted lens first impression. And let's see for hazards. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not only hazard removal I believe is the defog Hawlucha, correct? I don't think does Empoleon still get defog?
Well.
I don't think it.
It does.
Oh wow, it still has it. Wow.
I know,
what
right?
A miracle.
Big shocker. I know. Yeah, because I believe I had it on my Empoleon when I used it a while back.
Wow, I'm just so used to everything losing defog that whenever something actually keeps it, it's a miracle. Okay, so there you go.
Exactly.
So, with that being said, though, overall, think make a couple changes and I think it can improve. But from right now, I'm thinking like maybe a tier, B tier. What are you guys thinking?
I'm actually leaning towards B tier myself, to be honest with you, because the two biggest things that are throwing me with this team, because like I said, I think it's a good team. I think it's a solid team. I think it could come through, quote unquote. But I do think that this team, those big ice and fairy weaknesses are really throwing me, because again, those are very potent and common offensive types. So that's a big issue for me. But also the wasted Terra points. I feel like he could definitely clean it up with a couple of transactions. But as it stands right now, and not taking player skill into account, because I don't doubt the best. He's a very, very creative player. But as it stands now, I'm thinking B tier. But it's up to you, Brandon. What do you say?
Well, as we said, we're not going to take player skill into account. So on paper, I would give this team a B. I'm leaning towards a low A, high B, but I'm gonna just say B, high B.
I think B is for the best. I think definitely though this is a very good structure to have in place. I think that this could easily be cleaned up and brought up to an A tier. With some simple transactions. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid team. They got all the hazards in the world with Gliscor. The only thing is that they don't have a rapid spinner, so their only hazard removal is defog Hawlucha, which if they trade that, I'm gonna be honest, guys. I'm looking at Empoleon on Showdown, and it's telling me Scarlet and Violet OU. That's what I'm looking at.
All right, we got to fact check this real fast.
I check your Showdown because it's saying defog's illegal.
Oh,
I don't have Showdown. Maybe I made a mistake.
What do you got, Brandon?
I could have swore it got defogged, but maybe I'm wrong.
I know it used to.
Actually, it does not get defogged. Even Smogon says it does not get defogged in Scarlet.
Yeah, that's what I had in my head that I lost it. So
as wrong as I am, I feel like that only makes a little more of a point toward D tier, just because.
Yeah, so I think you clean this up. I think you get some hazard removal, and I think you get some better Terra captains.
Fire type.
But then once you get a fire.
One thing I do want to point out. Last season, we put him in B tier last season, and he went on to. Because I know we're not taking player skill into account. I just wanted to point this out. We put him in B tier last season, and he still finished second in the league.
Hey, listen, I've got no doubt that he's going to probably clean this team up and then start wrecking with Kyurem and Gliscor. I've got no doubt about that.
I'm sure my head could be first on the chopping block. We'll find out next week. But
definitely.
Yes, I think definitely that's why we don't take player skill into account as we wrap this up here, because at the end of the day, is we can look at these teams and we know most of these players, so it would make things, I think, so much more complicated for us to say, okay, well, we know this coach is good with this Pokemon, that coach is good with that Pokemon, so we that kind of thing. So I do think that would complicate our job a lot more than it all. So
Right.
but yeah, I have no doubt that he can maybe make a transaction or two and go far with this team. I mean, maybe potentially even without a transaction, he could go back to the playoffs with this team. So, but only time will tell, folks.
Absolutely. So if we look at our rankings, we've got a nice Gaussian distribution. We got 4 coaches in S, that being Beardoo, B-Nard, Al, and Arcaniner. We got 8 in the Big Fret and 4 in the Coming Through. The only thing I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm just making a last minute debate about Arcaniner's team. I'm just not sure because I'm looking at Psychic Terrain with Sneasler and Shiyu and Azumarill and all this other stuff. And what was the other S tier? Oh, the freaking bulk of Abomination's team. And I just don't know that Arcaniner's team quite hits the power level that those do. I know they've got the Terra Inteleon, which is very strong, and the SD Weavile and Lucario, but I think it's just not quite at the same level.
What do you think, Brandon? Do you want to make any last minute edits here?
I'm a stand by my initial decision to keep it in S.
Keep it S.
I think I'll agree with that, just because I'm going to agree with keep it in an S, just because, I mean, partially because of the what did you call it, the Gaussian distribution or whatever it is.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
But that's not really my reasoning, even though that is a nice addition. But I think so. The big positives for me are the damage output from this team is massive. The priority, this team has incredible priority. It's got great balance. It's got great Terra Captains. I think it does have all that stuff. It may not look quite as physically impressive as some of those other, like Beardoos and Owls, I think probably look the most physically impressive just at first glance. But I think this team belongs in S just due to the fact that it is so well-rounded. There's so few negative things to say about it. That's kind of where it sits for me. So I think S is still appropriate for this team.
Okay, cool. I don't really have these ordered by how good they are in ARS.
I mean, they're not really ordered as far as like how. Yeah, I think it's just if you're in S, you're in S. If you're in A, you're in A.
Yeah. And again, these are all subjective.
It's our most objective, subjective opinions on these teams. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, as we close it out here, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first one of these rankings that we've done where nobody falls into either the last 2 tiers.
As far as I know, yes.
Which were what do we have those last 2
tiers
at again?
We have could be better and get in the bin.
So no one has to get in the bin. No one could be better. So there, I think there you have it, folks. There's your as you look at the screen there, your official BHDL 4 power rankings, and this video is going to end up being just as long as the other one. So we tried to make it shorter, folks.
No. Hey, we cut 30 minutes, bro. We cut 30 minutes out.
Oh, there we go. We did it. So we better close it out quick then, if that's the case.
All right. With that being said, thanks you guys for watching this very long video. Again, please don't crucify us in the comments because I'm not going to read them. So, with that, we look forward to another season of BHDL. Thank you to Captain B-Nard and Brandon for sitting here with me as we had to re-record this. Don't worry though, I see the red dots, so we're all good. So, any closing thoughts, B-Nard or Brandon?
I'm excited for the season.
All right.
For the entertainment value, and we're excited for the season. We're ready to go.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.